All right, that's it. And I see Myron is in the backdrop and he's looking dapper. Is he looking ready? I see an American flag. Thumbs up, Myron. Let's see if you're coming in hot. Sir.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
Very good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Can you hear me good and see me good?
I'm going to hear, I can hear encrypt. Let me see. Hold on. Encryptors, you'll tell us if the audio is good. I'm going to zoom in on your face so that we maximize our real estate.
All good.
Myron, sir, are you following what's going on in Canada?
No, I am not. Fill me in what's going on.
No, it doesn't. We have our election, or Canadians have their election today. So today is the day where they're going to decide to re-elect the Liberal Party or elect the Conservative Party. We've got a crazy parliamentary system, so there's like 7 or 8 different parties, and it's a big day in Canada, but we'll see how it ends this evening.
So
Myron,
the functional equivalent of like the American election, pretty much in November for you guys.
Yes, it is. It is our November election day today, and people have been drawing some analogies between how accurate or inaccurate the polls are versus the two candidates, because like everyone's like, oh, they said Kamala was going to win, they said Hillary was going to win, and Trump beat them both times. But we don't really have a Trump up in Canada because apparently Canadians are so offended by any Trump-esque personality. Their populist conservative has to be pretty much a liberal Democrat.
Wow. You know, Canada is very much different. You guys are a lot nicer than we are.
Well, you see, I make the joke, nice until you disagree with them. Nice is in the sense of subservient. And then when you are no longer subservient to their subservience, that's when the subservients cease being nice and find the liberal tyrant in their heart. Myron, for my crowd's going to know who you are, but just in case they don't, tell them who you are. 30,000 foot overview.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Myron Gaines. Prior to this, I was a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. I used to do criminal investigations on the southwest border. I started my career in Laredo, Texas, where we went after, everything from Mexican cartel members, sicarios, drug traffickers, weapon smugglers, human traffickers, human smugglers, immigration violations, everything, money laundering. I did that for 4 to 5 years. Then I went over to the Miami field office. I did that for 2 years. And I was doing a podcast as I was starting up the podcast as I was working in the Miami field office. And they basically brought me in and said, hey, man, you got to pick one. I ended up resigning from the government. And now I work, doing the podcast, Fresh Fits, Male Self-Improvement. Then I also do Myron Gaines X, where I do more of the political/cultural commentary. I go live Monday through Friday and on Sundays, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And and then we just try to help guys out as much as we can with the male self-improvement. And we talk about a lot of other things going on, like feminism and all the other stuff people know us for.
Well, you've been in the news for other reasons, which we're going to get to. And it's I do. Okay, so hold on, like back it all the way up, because when I heard, I was listening to a couple of podcasts that you actually, you were doing field work for the government. Well, for which agency again?
For Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI. Basically, think of them as they're the biggest investigative arm of Homeland Security. So they're like the FBI for DHS.
Okay, and you weren't carrying a gun when you were doing that?
No, I was.
Have you ever shot anybody?
No, I never shot anybody.
Have you ever shot at anybody?
No, I never shot at anybody. Came close a few times, but never actually did. But yeah, it's an 1811 position, which is basically or a special agent. So it is a criminal investigator. You carry a gun. You're carrying cases. I had an AR-15 as well. I would bring that out for the raids. But yeah,
that's actually it's wild, and I want to flesh it out a little bit more. But
sure,
I like to go even before that. We're how many generations American are you?
I was born here, so my parents are American citizens, but they naturalized. But I was the first gen born in the U.S.
And where are your parents from originally?
Sudan.
But both mother and father.
Both of them.
And did they get married before coming here? Or did they meet each other here?
They got married back in Sudan, and then they came here after, because my dad had already was like coming back and forth here, so he brought her with him.
All right. And was your dad working for the American government as well in any capacity?
No. My dad, man, we grew up poor. My dad was a cab driver in New York City in the 1980s and 70s.
Shut up. Okay, so this is how many siblings do you have?
I have a sister. She's a doctor right now doing her residency. And I got a little brother. He's like 21.
And you're 36, 35?
35.
So you have a brother who's 14 years younger than you, from the same parents?
Yeah, 12 years younger than me. Yeah, he's like 23, I think. Yeah. And then same parents. Yep, same parents.
Hold on. How old were your parents when they had your youngest brother?
Yeah, I don't know what my mom was smoking. She was what was she? She was probably, she had me when she was 21. So yeah, she was like 33 when she had him.
Oh, well, that's still very young. I was looking for an excuse to knock up my wife again, but she's 43, so that probably won't happen. So, Sudanese immigrant refugees?
No, they were from North. Well, back then, Sudan used to be one country. Now it's North and South Sudan. But my parents are from the Arab North.
Okay. And why did, I mean, it's going to be a stupid question because everybody wants to come to America.
Question.
Well, I say, like, why did they come to America? Were they fleeing? I don't know if there was conflict at that time, but were they fleeing any conflict or just wanted to come to a better life?
Yeah. No, there was definitely conflict. South Sudan and North Sudan were fighting. This is before they had like they were fighting. The countries weren't split. Yeah, I think they split in like the 2010 or 2011, 2012-ish. But there was definitely fighting going on even at that point, back then.
I think this, I mean, I say it's a silly question. We look at some parts of the world and there's always fighting. It's just a question of the degree to which there's a flare up. So they come to America. Your dad goes to New York and becomes a cab driver in New York in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, he came here in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, is when he first got here.
But and that's taxi driver levels of when New York was at its, I don't know if it was at its nastiness, but pretty close to.
Yes. So 1990, if I'm not mistaken, was like the most. It was the had the most murders ever. 1990. So it was a bad time. New York City in the 90s was horrible. Giuliani eventually ended up coming in and cleaning it up, but it was very, very bad.
I remember, like, I was there in 1996. It was the first time I ever saw Blue Man Group with high school. We had a field trip, and it was pretty gritty, but that was sort of on the up end of when it was gritty. But it's kind of amazing. Your dad becomes a cab driver, and the obvious question is, he raises, I don't know what your youngest brother's doing, but at the very least, I'll say successful by every metric children. I mean, how does that work? What work ethic is your dad? How many hours a day is he driving a cab? What is life like with the dad cab driver? Is your mom at home?
Yeah, no. My dad is a big part of the reason why I'm the way I am now. Like my dad, so he's the type of guy works really hard. One thing I remember growing up as a kid, he refused to take welfare. He would never take it. He was like, I'm going to work for everything that I get. I'm not going to be one of these like scammer immigrants that comes here and just abuses welfare or whatever. So he always worked. And I remember one story about him, and I actually had to tell Rudy Giuliani this thank you when I saw him. But what ended up happening was my dad was driving a cab, and he was no stranger to weirdos that would, like, try to rob him or whatever. And in New York City in the 90s, like I said before, was really bad. And one day he was there at a gas station filling up, and he got hit. Basically, someone like hit him, and they ran away and ended up messing up his leg. He ended up breaking his leg, and instead of taking time off, right, what he did was he just drove a cab with a cast on. And my mom would go downstairs every day because we lived in like this apartment building. She would go downstairs every day, pick him up, and help him up the stairs. And that kind of like was a story that my mom told me way later on when I became an adult, that my dad did that. But that was just like his resilience to like get stuff done and be a provider, right? He didn't want my mom to work. That's just how he was. And he just really wouldn't take any excuses. So when Giuliani came, when I met Giuliani at the RNC, I said thank you, because he started going a lot harder on violent crime in New York City back then in the 90s. Because my dad had been robbed multiple times. He had been attacked being a cab driver. Had been put at gunpoint a few times. But yeah, when he got hit and the guy just ran away and broke his leg, he refused to take time off, and he just like drove the cab with a cast on.
I'm going to ask the politically incorrect question, and we're going to, it'll come earlier. The majority of the incidents that your dad had with held up at gunpoint, etc., demographically, was it white Americans, black Americans?
No, it was black dudes every time. Don't worry. I talk shit about the black community all the time. No.
Well, no, that'll be, when I say, like, some people get mad at the things you say about Jews in Israel, I was like, well, if it's fair game and he's critical of, but it's very important as well, because it does explain, again, the genesis story of someone who comes from Sudan, a foreign country, comes here to work hard, bust his ass, and then has those types of experiences, whether or not you would draw the same conclusions from those experiences, this would explain at the very least his experiences and how it brought you up to be the way you are. And not in a bad way. I'm saying it's
sure.
And so,
but with him, he you know, and this is why, it was 100% black people, man, and they're, you know, my thing is I'm critical of anybody, right? I don't just like I've talked shit about black people, Asians, Indians, you know, with the H-1B visa. Actually, that got me in trouble on X when I talked about the H-1B visas. But yeah, no, 100%. They were all black, man, every single time, because they're fucking, a lot of them were crooks in the 90s. And even to this day, let's be honest, the majority of the violent crime in the United States is all perpetrated by a minority of the people, unfortunately. So that's kind of what it is.
I presume your parents are Muslim?
Yes.
And were you brought up religious, or were they religious?
So they're religious. I was brought up fairly religiously. You know, obviously I'm not as religious as they are. I still believe in the religion. I still think it solves, you know, a lot of the problems. You know, but I'm not religious myself. I'd be lying if I sat here and said, "Oh yeah, I'm super religious." So,
no, I think. And again, you know, I don't know if your dad watches your channel, but with some of the ladies on the show, so we'll get into how that, you know, jives with everything in terms of some of the guests. But so you're an athletic kid, right? You did very well in university in sports.
Yeah. I was a Division I athlete in college. I was a rower. For those that are unaware, it's the sport of crew, which is like, you know, it's like the it's called crew or rowing. Like if you ever been to Boston, you see like the Harvard guys on the river, like rowing. I did that. I went to Northeastern. I graduated in 2013. So, you know, it was good because that kept me away from a lot of stupid stuff, right? Because when you're, you know, you go to college, people do drugs and do all that other stuff. Like me, I never did a drug in my life. I rarely drank. You know, we were always training because it was a year-round sport.
Okay, it's very cool. And I guess so. You work for Homeland Security for how many years did you do that for?
So I was an intern in 2010. I was 20 years old. I came on as an intern, and then I became an agent at 23 years old when I graduated from school. So, so that was in 2013. So yeah, I was with the agency a total of 10 years, 7 as agent, 3 as intern. And I left in 2020. I left December 4th, 2020. That because they basically made me pick one. They said, hey, you know, government or, you know, social media. And at that point, you know, I had employees, so I had to make the decision to you know, what I was going to do. So it was difficult, but you know, obviously I had to stick by my people because at that point people were depending on me, so I couldn't just let them down. But it was tough. I didn't want to leave the government, man. I know a lot of people love to be you know, yeah, I can't wait to leave my job and everything. I actually enjoyed working for the government quite a bit. It was a really fun job. You know, I had it since my 20s, and you know, I didn't want to leave.
Well, you mean the salary is decent, but I presume not comparable to what you're able to bring in on your own. If you work for yourself, you make a lot more money than working for someone else.
Yeah, for the government, I'd be honest. Like I was making about 120,000 a year working for the government in the Miami field office, which, you know, compared to being an entrepreneur, that's nothing. But you know, for me, I live way below my means. I'm a hardcore minimalist. I don't believe in, like, you know, flexing and, you know, all the other dumb stuff that idiots do when it comes to like buying jewelry and these extravagant things, luxury. You know, you've been to my place. The nicest things I have is a studio, but other than that, man, like my stuff is all relatively very low, minimalist. You know, I don't believe in luxury items. As a matter of fact, I think luxury a lot of times is a scam. Luxury items, luxury cars, luxury anything, luxury, you know, fine dining. I think it's all a scam, to be honest with you.
I know. I 1,000% agree. I just had my kid in Vegas for an event, and we're like walking around and people spending stupid money on stupid things, and like there's no value to this high end, call it not jewelry but design stuff. It is a big fat waste of money, but it's just to show that you have the money. But you're 35 now, not married, no kids, right?
No, not married, no kids. Nope.
Or is that on the horizon?
I would say for sure in the future. You know, I do think the nuclear family and kids are obviously the future. A lot of my political views, a lot of the times when I do say the things that I say, it's almost always based on you know, preserving a good future for the kids. Like, for example, like a lot of my anti-trans and anti-open homosexuality worldviews, that comes from like kids not having to see that, right? I don't think it's appropriate to have But whether lesbian or men, people kissing out in public in front of kids, I think that's problematic. And for that matter, I don't like it when I see heterosexuals either doing public displays of affection. I think PDA is just inappropriate in general. But it's even worse when two gay guys are kissing. I mean, I'll just be honest, it's disgusting when gay guys kiss. That's
let me ask you the rhetorical question. How about when two attractive lesbian women kiss?
Not as bad, but I still don't want kids seeing it.
Well, no, see, I agree in the general rule about like grotesque public displays of affection or just public displays of indecency. That being said, normal loving relationships. This is one thing where I don't have any of the problem that some people on what they call the right has with gay marriage. And I know there's a number of people who say like, a man and a woman is obviously the ideal circumstance. Does it mean that there's something sinful about the alternatives where if there are two functional loving parents, be they both men or be they both women, that's still better than having a broken home or not having the kid to begin with? The question is this: where is it the slippery slope that you see or others see in terms of? I see in reality people will say, well, it's gone from gay marriage to 2S LGBTQIA plus rights and transgender ideology and gender mutilation and genital mutilation on kids. Do you see that transition, pun intended, as necessary, or evolution as necessary from supporting gay marriage or gay rights?
So the question is, do you need to support the trans movement to support the gay rights movement?
No, I guess the less convoluted way of asking it is, do you see as a necessary evolution from supporting gay rights and gay marriage the transgression into the 2S LGBTQIA trans movement? Like, do you see that as the inevitable outcome for supporting gay marriage?
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I'll go back even before that. I think feminism started all these problems. Because feminism was the banner that brought all the other, social justice topics to the fray. Whether it was, you got general egalitarianism, gay rights, etc. It all came under the banner of feminism. But to go back to your specific question, as far as do I think that supporting gay rights will inevitably lead to the alphabet community, I would say yes to a degree. But this is where I think, like me personally, I don't support gay marriage, and I'll explain what I mean. I'll break that down a little bit. I think gays should have the ability to have a civil union, but I think them being able to have a gay marriage is, number one, it bastardizes the sanctity of the institution, and it's a religious thing. And I'm not even a religious guy, but I still think that we need to have, if we're going to have religious institutions, they need to be protected. So if gays want to be able to, get the benefits and the rights of a marriage where it's, they're getting the tax benefits and everything else like that, cool. But to call it a marriage, I think it bastardizes the movement or the sanctity of that union. So I think we should be giving them their own thing, but not necessarily under the umbrella of religion. So that's my take on it when it comes to gay marriage. Civil union is fine, but marriage, no. And then as far as supporting them, yes, I do think that, if you support it to some degree fully, you're going to have to eventually get to the level of you're going to have to at least have the conversation about transgenderism and do you support it or whatever. And then some people say, I do support it. And then some people have common sense to say, no, this is problematic. So, but I do think that gay marriage was the slippery slope that brought us here. When Obama kind of brought that into the fray, roughly 10 years ago now at this point, a little over 10 years ago. So yeah,
it is interesting because again, it's like you don't have to agree with the argument, but at least you have to make an attempt to understand it. In Quebec, we have something called civil union, and it's all of the legal recognition to same-sex couples, but you don't call it marriage. For people who think the definition of marriage is the holy union between a man and a woman, as per the Bible, I now appreciate how people are going to say, I'll give you all the rights in the world, but not the word because of what the word means. And then you analogize that to them saying, recognize me as a transgender and call me a woman, even though I'm not. And you say, I want the word, not just rights under the law. Going even further back, are you one of the people who would support repealing the 14th Amendment, the women right to vote?
Oh, the 19th Amendment.
19th, sorry. 14th, I think is unlawful. What is it? Unreasonable bail. I forget what the 14th is, but yeah, repealing the 19th. Are you someone who seriously believes in that?
It's still impressive. You're Canadian, and most Americans don't even know, so it's still impressive. Yes, I'm a firm believer in repealing the 19th Amendment. I don't think women should vote, and a reason for that, I tie it mostly to the the draft, right? So in America, we have something called the selective service, where when you're 18 years old as a man, you have to register in, and if you don't, you could deal with some serious consequences. You could get fined, you could go to jail, you won't be able to get a government job, you won't be able to get funding. It really impedes your ability to move in the United States. It's almost like being a convicted felon almost. So if you're not in the selective service as a man at 18 years old, there's going to be some problems, but women don't have to necessarily enroll in it. Now, I know some people might say, oh, well, Myron, when's the next time we're going to have a draft, right? You got to start being a little bit more realistic or whatever. Well, my thing is, I look at it like there needs to be skin in the game. Now, with that said, I do think that we should be having people take, I think step one, you need to be in the civil service, and I think it should be men only. And then number two, I do think that we do have a lot of guys that are idiots that don't understand certain things. Maybe we need to put a test out there where they need to take this test, maybe a civil test or something like that, to give them the ability to vote. But in general, I don't think women should have the right to vote. And then there's a bunch of biological reasons as well. But just to keep it nice and simple, I think the selective service is a big reason why they shouldn't vote. I don't think them not having I think the fact that they don't have skin in the game, yet they're able to elect the commander-in-chief that could send us to war, I think that's wild. And then let's be honest here too. Women, a lot of times, they're single-issue voters. They just want to vote for whoever's going to be able to let them kill babies. If we're going to be very candid here, the whole DNC, right, was based around abortion. Literally was based around abortion. And that's because that is a voting topic that that they know women are going to be interested in, and they know that the Democrats are going to lean more towards. And that's really the only thing that they have on the left when it comes to getting voters is, saying that we're gonna let you go ahead and kill as many babies as you ladies want. And that's what they care about the most.
How much flack do you take? I mean, I'll preface this by saying, again, don't agree with it only because I don't, I say once you start getting into excluding demographics from voting, and people are going to say to you, Myron, especially as a son of Sudanese immigrants or as a black man in America, once upon a time, blacks weren't allowed to vote. And once you start excluding one demographic, well, then it's only going to be a matter of time before they take away your right to vote. And they'll say at least the criteria for your right to vote is rather arbitrary. Why not make it paying taxes? Then they have skin in the game type thing. But who gives you the most flack for this?
Oh, man, everybody. Women obviously get very mad at me because I look at, when I say the things that I say a lot of the times, I do think that in a lot of cases, I had a tweet that went viral. I said that women need to go back to being second-class citizens. And what I mean by this is, that we've given them so much power and so much privilege that it's created problems, right? If we look at the birth rates being low, if we look at the problems that we have where they don't necessarily contribute to society to the same level, where they're not necessarily in infrastructure jobs, they've completely taken over academia and led to the woke culture. A couple weeks ago, I was over at University of South Carolina, and I was talking about.
I saw some of those highlights.
You saw some of that?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do it. But it's even funny, even if you don't believe it, just to see the reactions of someone, an adult male, telling a woman to, go back to the kitchen. I mean, it is. They would call it crass juvenile insults and stupidity. The inability of people to laugh it off is what I find truly stunning about it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Now, please go on.
No worries. So, I was having these debates, and, some of the stuff is, just it's funny because, people get so pissed off or whatever. But I truly do think that, if we're gonna run a great society, it's got to be a strict patriarchy. And all we've seen from, female liberation and, female sexualization and modernity in general and the growth of feminism is we've just seen the society kind of be degraded. So, people sit there and say, oh, well, Myron, is it all the women, blah, blah. Well, look, I think when you put women in positions of leadership, a lot of the times it creates problems. The society that we have now and a lot of the things that we enjoy was created by men, right? And a lot of times for women, by the way. If you look at like a lot of the inventions that allowed women to even enter the workforce, like sanitation tools, et cetera, like the tampon, whatever, all these things were made by men. So, but at some point, we also have to be able to say, okay, enough is enough. We need to push some of this stuff back, because when women enter the workforce or when women are too involved, I think it creates a lot of problems. So, and then a big problem that I see is the over-sexualization of women and how it's been basically mainstreamed for women to be sex workers. That's a big problem, but that can only come, in extreme times of feminism like we have now. So I think if we don't really start making some steps to reel some of this back in, we're gonna have some serious problems.
Now, this is not to fight and it's not to be antagonistic. Some people, you have to anticipate the arguments, are going to
Sure.
say what you do on your show with the I don't know what the word is. What's the word for the ladies that come in after the late part of the show?
Oh, it's called after hours.
Okay. Some people are going to say that that's specifically contributing to the problem, or at least exploiting of the problem. And so, not speaking out of both sides of your mouth, but on the one hand, you're criticizing something while simultaneously capitalizing off of it.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. So, okay. So the after hours, right? We actually keep numbers on all the girls that come on the show. Some girls are regular girls that have regular jobs. Some girls are OnlyFans girls, etc. Like the last show we actually had a couple of college graduates. One of them was actually a master's graduate, right? So we do bring on a good amount of women that actually are educated, that go to school. But what I've come to realize is, regardless of women's education levels or their intelligence, whatever, they still regress back to female, traits, which is, getting emotional when facts are presented, disliking certain worldviews, egalitarian mindset, thinking everybody is equal, like the lack of a gross unawareness of meritocracies and hierarchies. Like it's actually fascinating to see how women, regardless of how educated they are, what their background is, etc., they're just like not cognizant of these certain things that like guys like me and you will understand immediately, like a meritocracy and hierarchies. Women don't understand this stuff. So when I'm having conversations with them about this, it's very difficult for them to understand. Now, that's one part. And then the other part, obviously, there are girls that come on that do OnlyFans or whatever. Now, I think it's important, right, to be able to engage with these individuals and show how their worldview is ridiculous. Now, we all know that people want to be entertained. So if you can entertain people while also teaching them, that's a fantastic way to build a great audience and also keep people retained onto the content. So now some of my critics might say, oh, well, you bring a lot of these thoughts on. Yeah, sometimes we do. That is true. But I think if we're bringing them on and we are challenging the worldview and showing how it's incorrect and a lot of these women are idiots, I think that does far more good than bad. There's been a few times where we've brought girls on where they thought about doing OnlyFans, or a girl watched this and thought about doing OnlyFans. Then she saw the girls come on the show and how they behaved and how stupid they were. And she said, you know what? I don't want to do that. And she changed her mind. So we've been able to get girls to quit OnlyFans, stop doing it, or not go into sex work at all, because they see what's up happening when they go into that world. Even if it's something like stripping, where you can relatively hide it and conceal that background. But girls have watched the show and said, you know what, I'm not going to do that. So I do think you have to engage with the opposition to some degree to show them how their worldview is wrong. And if people can watch that, I think it's a huge learning experience.
You see, what I love about that is you didn't know I was going to ask that question. I didn't know I was going to ask that question. And there's nobody out there who could have listened to that answer that's going to disagree with that answer. And just so I'm clear, I'll clarify for everybody. Thought is THOT, which stands for that hoe over there.
You know what? I never knew what the acronym was, but I now you taught me something. I didn't know that's what it stood for.
I remember learning that. I was like, oh, I learned something new that is totally useless and totally stupid. Because I always said, like, I thought they were calling them thoughts because they had, I don't know, silly thoughts, but it was THOT. Okay, it's fascinating. It's very interesting whether people disagree with it or not. The issue about women becoming, as you put it, second-class citizens again. Is it not just a question of the freedom of choice? And if a woman wants to go and not have babies or be, one of the lawyers, literally knew a lawyer who broke her water at the office. If you want to be that, go ahead and be that. But is it not a question of just sensitizing people to traditional values of whether you like it or not? There are biological differences, physiological differences, brain differences, and historically women have occupied certain roles and men have occupied that of the warrior, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. Is it about sensitizing them to it, or trying to actually legislate it at some point in time?
This is a good question. So my thing with this, right? And I say subclass citizens, I'm being funny, right? But like my thing is, I think we at least need to educate them and let them know, look, go ahead and pursue your education, go ahead and go to school, sure, but understand that you are never going to get the same level of fulfillment as you will from a family. And I think the biggest thing is that we've lied to women. I think we need to start being very candid and honest with women and let them know, look, you want to go to school, you want to pursue a career, that's fine. But we're not going to sit here and lie and tell you, okay, you can have it all. You're going to get the family, you're going to get the money, you're going to get the career, you're going to be this badass lawyer and become partner and also have 3 loving children that want to be with you at all times and a husband. Like, it's not, you're going to have to pick one. You're going to have to sacrifice. I think the biggest lie we've told women is that they can have it all. The Sheryl Sandberg mantra of have your fun in your 20s, and then in your 30s, go ahead, you'll find your dream man later on for you. And I would argue it's become even worse now, because not only are we telling women to pursue their career, now we're telling them you can be a whore too. And there's going to be a guy waiting for you. It used to be before, hey, you could go and get your education and do what you want to do and find your guy at 30 years old. Now we're telling women, not only can you just go find your education, you can also have your fun and be a slut, and then your guy will be there as well. You can even do some OnlyFans. You can have a sugar daddy here or there. Like, it's really bad how how we're indoctrinating young women to kind of just tell them like, oh yeah, there's no consequences to your whoredom.
I saw this in one of the, I don't know which episode it was. It might have been a clip where you said, they become the sluts and the men who do this are the slut makers. And
Yes.
my initial reaction to that was, on the one hand, if you find something morally objectionable about being a slut, you would not find anything remotely proud in being the slut maker. You are partaking in now, I'm not accusing you of it. I don't know what your sexual proclivities are, and it's none of my business. But you would concede that it's as immoral or potentially comparably immoral to both engage in that promiscuous behavior and be the male who turns the woman into that person living with that promiscuous behavior?
Oh, no. So on this one, actually, I think for men, it's almost required nowadays. For women, no. So for men, when I say guys need to get so I have 5 things I tell guys they need to have in place before they decide to get married, especially in today's day and age. They got to be making 6 figures a year, have 6 months to 1 year of savings, be in shape, 35 years old, and have had sex with 50 women. Now,
5-0.
5-0, and I'll explain this. I know that's very shocking. A lot of the traditional conservatives get mad at me about this. Ben Shapiro did a whole video about this, about disagreeing with this. Now, the reason why I say this, now, does it need to be an explicit 50? No, doesn't need to be an explicit 50. But what I mean by this is, it's not necessarily the number that matters as much as I want guys to get experience to deal with modern women. Now, I think it's very important that people understand that women, right, in today's day and age, the way women are now, especially women that are like being raised, right, women that are turning 18, 19, 20, 21 now, the girls that are desirable, I would say, right, because men look at women at a certain age group, they're growing up with a different set of rules than even, just a generation past the girls in my age group grew up with. They're growing up with an entire different worldview, different set of rules, etc. And I think men need to understand this and be keenly aware that the women that your mother told you about no longer exist, right? The, nice girls that, would save their virginity and not be whores or not be promiscuous, etc. That's effectively gone, right? I can't tell you how many times we brought girls on our show, 18, 19 years old, and they already have 20 partners, right? This is where we are in society. Now, it's an ugly reality, but this is what feminism has done. This is what modernity has done. And this is what, society's basically done, where we've told women that they could be like men. And if guys don't understand how modern women are, what's going to happen is he's going to play by a set of rules. Let's say we take a religious guy, right? A religious guy that goes to church and he believes in, I'm not going to have sex until marriage or whatever. That's great. That's noble. I respect that. But here's the problem. The woman that he ends up getting with or potentially marrying, right? She might go ahead and have been a 304, but decides to change her life around, doesn't tell him about it. He doesn't know. He can't look at the
304
is a whore.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you put it in a graphing calculator, 304, it says hoe.
Okay. Okay. Well, now I learned something. All right. Yeah. I know boobies on the calculator. 800135 or something. Whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen that before too.
Okay, so interesting.
So he doesn't know, right? So he won't know these things. So what ends up happening is he gets with this girl, right? And he doesn't know about her past because he wasn't able to pick up on the red flags. He thinks that she was, a girl that was saved by God. And then what ends up happening? She reserves the right to always go back to herself, to what she used to be. I use an example. Look at Steven Crowder. He had this wife, right, who was a devout Christian. And what did she do? She regressed back to feminist ideals and tried to destroy his name in the process. And this is what I need guys to kind of understand, is that regardless of how religious you are, regardless of how religious you think your wife is, women always reserve the right to use the feminist route to absolutely destroy your life. So I want guys to not just be red-pilled from a religious perspective, but I need you to be red-pilled from a female perspective and be able to identify these women early on in the relationship so you don't commit to these types of women and then put yourself in a bad spot, because men take on far more risk when they get married nowadays, especially if they're the breadwinner, than women do. So this is why I want guys to ensure that they're able to identify and detect these types of women so that they don't commit to them. So, and you do that through sexual experience, unfortunately. Now, I wish we could go back to a day where both parties are virgins, they get married on their wedding night, and it's beautiful. But thanks to us being in a what I call a deregulated sexual marketplace where women are the ones kind of choosing who fucks and who doesn't, this is kind of how we adapt to the new normal.
Well, okay, I think 4 of your 5 points, I think we all agree with, and they're actually very good. I think this is one of two things. It's either the man whores trying to justify their man whoredness, like I get to have my addiction while judging others for theirs.
Sure.
Or flip side, it's just, okay, well, now I'm going to break myself because society's broken, instead of just looking for that person who is not a 20-person. That, Myron, and putting your wee-wee in that many different people, you're going to find something that you don't want to discover, and that's going to be an STD at some point. I don't care how many condoms you use. So we'll agree to disagree on the number of 50. That I think breaks a man and makes it incapable to actually settle down, but I don't know that from experience, so maybe I'm totally wrong. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have to agree with it if you don't want to. Like I said, my thing is it's more from a perspective of the guy being able to identify women that are worthy of committing to versus women that aren't, because my fear is that I don't want a guy, because here's the problem, right? When guys get laid, right, they end up making really bad decisions a lot of the times, and they might forego identifying red flags for sexual access. So they'll be like, oh, this girl's really hot. Wait, she has this really weird habit, but you know what? I just want to get laid. And they'll they'll totally ignore like red flags or blaring things that are probably potentially going to be problematic later on. They see the smoke, but they say, you know what? There's no fire. I'll be fine. So, and it's since men's need to mate and get sexual access is so powerful, they'll totally ignore that for a month, years, and then when it does become a problem, it's too late. So I just want guys to be able to think with this head up top versus the head down there.
Yeah,
and when guys are less sexually experienced, they're more likely to make really bad decisions from a mating standpoint with a woman that quite frankly never deserved in the first place.
But but you have sex with 50 different women, one of them, or at least 2 of them, are going to be psychotic, and you're going to have some big problems there as well in terms of having dip the company ink. And
that's why she's recreational use only, and you now you know never to deal with girls like that.
Now, but the other thing is this. You're right that I haven't dated since 1999, and I can't imagine what it's like today. Like I can't. I could. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, are you? What is it like? I mean, I can't even, like, where do you go to meet people? Because nobody does seemingly. Like when I was a kid, we used to rock climb. We used to go to the gym, the rock climbing gym, biking, dog runs. Like, where do people meet these days, and what's it like trying to have a relationship?
Yeah, no, it's really bad, man. So basically, okay, so and I've talked about this in detail, so I'll go through this. So like, as technology has gotten better, right, and the internet has become a thing, what's ended up happening now? Because you said you haven't dated since 1990. So in the 1990s, women had to go outside, right, to find a man. They had to put effort into the way they dressed, the way they looked. They had to put themselves out there. They had to have real interactions. They had to be able to communicate with an individual, right? Make themselves available. Now, thanks to the internet, namely Instagram and dating apps, especially, what's ended up happening where women are now able to basically have their pictures on the internet, have their Instagram profiles there, and men just approach them via the internet. Now, when it comes to Instagram and social media, what this has effectively done is a woman's phone is now like a box of cocks. They open up their phone and they got a bunch of dudes offering them all types of offers, whether it's I'll fly to Dubai, I'll give you money here, I'll be your sugar daddy, I'll simp on you, whatever. So what this has done is it's made women a lot of the times insufferable, entitled, rude, obnoxious, and stupid, because they haven't had the need to prove themselves to be a good girlfriend, to be a good wife, or whatever. So what ends up happening is you have an entire generation of extremely entitled brats that now exist out in society. You know, they're dumber, they're less intelligent, they're not interesting, they don't have any hobbies, they're not you know, and quite frankly, they think that they're better than a lot of guys. Any young man that's watching this right now probably knows what I'm talking about, where if you take an average woman, she thinks she is more important than an average man. She thinks I deserve a guy. I'm a 5, even though she's going to look at herself as a 9 or a 10. She's going to think I deserve a 9 or a 10. And it's because of the internet, and it's because of this constant attention that they get, where no matter what, they just open up their phone and someone is hitting them up. Now, the problem with this is that since all the women think that they're 10s, they all think that they're entitled to the top tier guys. And what ends up happening is the top tier guys, all the women are chasing them. So what ends up happening is these guys never settle. Meanwhile, the regular guys that maybe 20, 30 years ago that would have been able to get, a good monogamous relationship, these guys are getting ghosted. These guys are not, or these guys are struggling. These guys are having a very hard time finding girlfriends. So this, what ends up happening now is the marriage rates are plummeting. The divorce rates are skyrocketing. Women don't find a majority of men as attractive because women's needs have shifted, because while this pernicious, activity has been going on with the social media and women being, getting their fucking egos lit on this side, what also has been going on is women are becoming more educated. So not only are they getting it from the validation with the internet, now they're becoming more educated, they're making more money. We all know, thanks to hypergamy, when women make money and become rise up the socioeconomic status, they want a guy that's better than them, if not at least bare minimum on their level. But on average, they want a guy making about 56% more money than they do. So not only are their egos out the fucking woozah because the internet, now their standards are going up alongside it. So what ends up happening is virtually no guy qualifies for a lot of these girls. And what ends up happening is when women are in their peak, in their 20s, etc., they don't want these guys. They want to go ahead and just kind of play the field, be single. If they do have a guy, they think that they could do better. And this was kind of led to this hookup culture that we have now, and this situation where so many women are complaining and saying that they can't find a guy, not knowing that the reality is the reason why they can't find a guy is their standards are too goddamn high. But they don't want to hear that because women think that they're special and they all think that they're 11 out of 10s. So you have multiple things going on socially and culturally that have kind of led to this degradation of the relationships. And it's because of the internet, social media, dating apps, women being educated, women entering the workforce, etc., that's led to this overall degradation, and why so many guys are struggling now versus 20, 30 years ago where we saw more relationships.
Well, I can't say that I didn't picture myself in there in terms of an average man today who would have gotten totally ghosted. And when I met my wife, we were at a house party. Of course, I met her when she was 17 and I was 19. So she had not yet met any better, if there is. It is wild that you met, the internet thing in terms of just having every access on earth, just, flipping through and the right swip or the left. I forget which one is which way. I wouldn't want to be dating today, but what is it's going to be a stupid question. What's your advice to men then? You give them the good advice, the 4 or the 5 points, get a good, decent job, get some decent savings, be in shape. What was the 4th one that I agreed with? Exercise, 6 digits.
Yeah, so have a good amount of savings, like 6 months to 1 year of savings. Obviously be in shape, go to the gym, you got to train. 35 results, you have a little bit, you're a bit more worldly, you understand things.
Yeah, that was the other one.
So stuff like that. So, but yeah, and that's just like entry level, just to be in a position where you'll be attractive to a good amount of women, where you can be in an authority position, because a lot of women make their own money. A lot of them are successful. A lot of them are educated. And then a lot of them, just to be honest, are very arrogant and cocky. Like, they'll never admit this, but the reason why I speak about this in the manner that I do, because a lot of people might be watching like, Myron, not all women think this way, blah, blah, blah. No, a lot of them do. And the thing is that they'll sit there and they'll try to play the humble card or whatever. But the reality is their mating practices tell you guys everything you need to know. When women sit there and they say, I'm very picky or blah, 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 that's based 100% on where they view themselves. I think guys need to understand, when a woman has high standards and says, I'm picky, blah, 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 she's doing that based off of what she thinks she deserves. So that is a very easy way to see where a woman sees herself in the sexual marketplace. And most women have an overinflated sense of self-worth to the 10th degree. They'll be there and they'll say, I'm a 9 out of 10, I'm a 10 out of 10, oh, I'm perfect. And they'll want a guy on their level, if not more. But the only reason why they believe that is because we live in this very kiss women's ass, they are the prize, gynocracy. And guys need to wake up and understand that this is the world that we're in. And the only way that you're going to be able to really compete is, number 1, you need to have your stuff together. Number 2, you need to be able to, kick her ego down a little bit and remind her that she's inferior to you. And then number 3, be able to adapt to the new normal, which is a sexual marketplace that women, quite frankly, control.
Well, you say kick her down to let her know that she's inferior to you. I think I know what you mean by it, but explain that to the people who are going to melt because they heard that.
Yeah. So the key is you need to, the thing. Okay. So this is why, so women will sit there and say, I want an equal partner, but that's not true. They don't want an equal partner. They want a superior. They want a guy that's better than them in every regard. They'll sit there and say, I want a partner or whatever. But if you actually end up becoming that partner, she's going to lose respect for you, because being a partner infers equality. And that's something that women actually find reprehensible, despite the fact that they try to sit there and say that they want an equal partner. They want a superior, they want a leader, they want a dominant, etc. And a perfect example of this is if you watch, look at the books they read. The books that women read, romantic novels, 9 out of 10 times, what they're actually aroused by, 50 Shades of Grey and these other romantic novels, it catalogs a man who is the dominant versus the woman being the submissive. This is what women are actually aroused by and super attracted to, despite the fact they don't want to admit this, because for them admitting this, it would basically infer that they're inferior, which they fucking are. And if you actually treat them like that, they're going to have far more respect for you. So that's number one, is understanding that that they don't want a guy that's equal to them. And not only do you have to be better than them in every regard, you got to be better than them strength-wise. You got to be smarter than them. You got to be taller than them. You got to be fitter than them. You need to be able to basically be almost like in a mentor status. And I know a lot of people say, well, I don't want that, Myron. That seems like a lot of work. Well, guess what? That's what it takes nowadays to keep women truly attracted and aroused by you and be in a position where you always have the frame. And you're the leader in the relationship and you're the boss, because that's how women want it. Now, they'll never admit this for obvious reasons, because it shows their female nature, shows how inferior they are. And, obviously they fought through feminism the past several decades to get equality. But the problem is that, as with everything, they imply the equality, but they don't really want it. They just want the ability to be able to have the opportunity, but they still want a guy that's better than them in every regard. And I think guys need to really, take this in and understand that this is the new normal, right? What they say versus what they respond to are two different things. And I know for a lot of guys like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This guy's radical. This guy's a misogynist, blah, blah, blah. This is the way it's always been. Women never wanted equals. They never did. The only reason, right, women fight for equality and egalitarianism and feminism, the only reason they fought for that was so that they don't have to be with equals. I'm going to say that again. The only reason women have fought through feminism, egalitarianism, everything else like that, is so that they don't have to saddle themselves up with someone that is equal. They would rather work for their own stuff and be by themselves, right? And do everything by themselves than be with a man that they see as equal, okay? That's what they actually fought for, the feminism. So they don't have to saddle themselves up with a fucking loser. Now, if you're a winner, they will gladly throw all that feminism stuff by the wayside and be your woman, but they need you to be superior to them in order for them to do that. That's the truth with feminism. It was to get rid of the normal guys and remove them from the sexual marketplace so they don't have to saddle themselves up with that guy. They'd rather go to college and take on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, stress, work for someone that doesn't care about them, and put themselves in an early grave so they don't have to be with an average guy. That's how much women hate average men.
It is, when you mention like women being, or people being picky, and when you say like that, and I view that as sort of like a transactional view of human relationships, like how tall, how strong, whatever, as opposed to just viewing the human. But the idea, what you're describing, sounds a little bit like the innate desires of what made women and men throughout history versus the feminist promise, which is they want to be if you say the alpha of the relationships, where it doesn't work when someone actually has to carry the babies and raise the babies, and that subconsciously they want something that they haven't been promised, they were told was the opposite by the modern feminist movement, if we can put it in more politically palatable terms.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about that. I was getting my guy to help me with some stuff, because for some odd reason I was supposed to be streaming this on YouTube, but it's only on Rumble. So basically, the whole feminist like movement, etc. A big part of it was to allow women, right, the same opportunities as men, because this is what feminism really is about, right? Women want the ability to be able to do what men do, but at the same time be able to get off that, what I call like the masculine journey, whenever they feel like, okay, you know what, I'm tired of working. This sucks. I just want a guy to take care of me now. And they can go ahead and kind of just get off that career trajectory and then have a man take care of them. Because regardless of woman's success level, no matter how, masculine she is or whatever, she still wants a man that could provide for her or get married and have kids one day, almost always. So, they always, they want to be able to just be able to reserve that right to, get off the totem pole whenever it suits them.
It's funny. I was coming into this thinking like, oh, if I have a zinger, if I'm going to finally ask the question that I've always been wondering, is why the men in call it the manosphere, I don't know if that's a demeaning word, or they tend to be single without kids. And as I asked you, not as a judgmental question, men have a lot more time to do it, but I'm thinking like, okay, in the manosphere, the big names, Myron Gaines, you got the Tate brothers, you got, you have to give me another name, but the ones that I've noticed, they
Rollo
tend to be,
Tomasi, myself, there's a bunch of us there. Yeah, you got guys like Donovan Sharp, Rollo Tomasi, myself, Andrew Tate, his brother.
and I'm
Um,
not wrong, all unmarried and with no kids, right?
well, Andrew has a bunch of kids. He's talked about that. Tristan too. Rollo has a wife. He's married. He has
So yeah, they don't have the traditional kids with different women is not going to be exactly what I guess they would.
Rollo has a traditional family.
Okay,
Rollo does.
Well, my question was going to be like, why some of the younger, and I'm saying younger compared to me, don't have that traditional system. And now, when you describe this reality with which I am totally unfamiliar, I look at my wife and I like we got married after dating for 8 years, monogamous dating relationship, kids and everything, and like maybe it's just not possible anymore in this day and age of dating and marriage and political expectations. I don't know. Is it simply not possible? What I thought was pretty standard traditional stuff from the late 90s, early 2000s, not feasible anymore?
That's a good question. I think we're at a point now where regular guys are going to have to work a lot harder because unfortunately, thanks to the internet and thanks to how we've kind of what I call like a globalized sexual marketplace, it's made it where it truly is far more competitive, right? A regular guy would have been able to, find a girl before, right? In the golden era in the 50s, right? You could just have a factory job. You get a wife that was going to be submissive to you. She probably wasn't a 304. And you'd be fine, right? You can have your two family. You can have your 2-3 kids, your dog, white picket fence, the American dream. But I think nowadays, being an average guy and being able to find an attractive woman and be able to get her to submit to you, because it's not just about getting the woman anymore. Now it's about getting her where she's going to be in a position where she feels as though she wants to submit to you. Because keep in mind, we've made it where we've socialized, if we made it completely socially acceptable for women to talk back to men. We've made it socially acceptable for women to be rude to men. We've made it socially acceptable for women to leave men if they're not happy. We've made it where, I say this saying all the time, women will destroy their family if they're not happy. Men will destroy themselves, for their family to be happy. So we live in this very, we call it a gynocentric social order, where if the woman's not happy, happy wife, happy life. Like all these, like our entire society is framed around female happiness and her being satisfied. So we have all these different institutions set up for women's benefit. So guys need to kind of go into this with their eyes wide open and understand that, hey, if you get married, or hey, you get in a long-term relationship, or hey, just the courtship process now, it's changed a lot. Now, luckily, you met your wife when you were young. You guys met in the 90s. You guys met in a time where social media was not a pernicious social thing that we have nowadays that's literally destroying our young women. But it's going to be a lot harder for the young guys, because I don't think, like even myself, like I have to get a lot of this stuff from looking at the internet, talking to my younger people. But social media has absolutely corrupted both men and women, both young men and young women.
That much I can understand, especially the pornography side of it. Like we grew up in kids, we had access to nudie magazines, and you'd have to go to a store and ask for the top shelf, or go into the movie store and go behind the beaded things, and if you wanted to catch a glimpse. And now it's like the most hardcore at your fingertips. I can't imagine what that does to kids, and we're going to have to figure this out because we got 3 kids of our own.
Yeah, totally ubiquitous. It's wild, right? Like used to be very hard to access. Now it's, thankfully they got rid of it in Florida, where you have to log in and show your age, which is good. But yeah, man, this is like all of the ubiquity of pornography, social media, etc. Like all of this has been extremely destructive, and I think it's going to have some serious consequences for the next generation.
This is the question I had to ask when you said, like, women get used to talking back, yada yada, and I know I can hear the snowflakes screaming, and part of me says, well, okay, people are equal, and if someone wants to be a rude jackass, well, they'll end up divorced, like 50 some odd % of people out there. Flip side is, go to societies where women can't talk back, and I can only think of like the most extreme religious societies, which are not, which I wouldn't want to emulate either. So there is something of a middle ground in there where, I do believe spouses should talk back to each other, but they should fight in private, not in public. And I definitely understand the idea, the emasculating thing that goes on with being slapped by a woman, and that becomes somehow cute and acceptable. But God forbid the roles are reversed and it becomes quite literally criminal spousal abuse. I don't know what the middle ground is.
When I say talk back, I mean as in, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, Sean Connery or girl. No, what I'm saying is that.
And for those who don't know, Sean Connery talked about slapping a woman if she was rude to him.
Yeah. So no, what I mean by that is like she's constantly challenging your authority. Like you say, hey, this is going to be the final decision, and she doesn't respect that, right? Because it should have. I think any relationship dynamic, the man needs to be the final decision maker. I'm not saying don't listen to what your girl has to say or to what your woman has to say. Obviously, her opinion matters. And what's going on, but you need to be the final decision maker. But when you make these final decisions or when you say something, she's constantly challenging your authority. And I say that because we live in a society now where it's amazing to me how many times I ask a woman, hey, what do you think men want? And she says, like girls literally think that challenging their guy or making him better through challenging him is something that men want. And it's actually alarming how many young women think that this is something that men find attractive. And it's like, no, that's not what we find attractive whatsoever. But they've been indoctrinated through feminism, through mainstream media, to think challenging their man is something that men want. No, the last thing a guy wants to do is work all day, challenge the world, then come home and have his wife challenge him. That's completely antithetical. But young women think that this is attractive. So that's what I mean by that.
And I just happened to flip over to the Rumble and look at one chat, and it just stuck up right now. It says, Christine Anderson, this guy's a real jerk. He hates women and thinks we are useless. I know what your response is going to be, but let me hear it.
Yeah. So the reality is the majority of women are useless. And they don't like to hear that. But, a big reason why so many women are useless is because they've never had to be useful, if we're going to be honest here. Because a lot of women, right, especially if they're attractive, they just get everything given to them. Like, let's be very candid here. A man's life is significantly harder than a woman's life in every regard. Right? Men have to earn their value. Women don't. Now, if women do want to work hard and become successful, absolutely. There's a bunch of women out there that are extremely hardworking, right? I could give my sister as an example, but that's far and few between. Most women prefer not to enter the workforce or work a super hard job or have to go through, ridiculous levels of education to reach that job. And if they do actually go through, they end up quitting or backing out because the reality is there's no real proclivity for women to earn an abundance of money or resources because their sexual market value is not determined by that. A man is far more likely to work hard because if we don't work hard, we don't get laid. We don't get sexual access. We can't procreate. But for a woman, if she decides, I don't want to work hard, that's not going to affect her ability to find a suitor. Okay. And in many cases, it'll probably make it easier for her to find a suitor when she's not too successful. So when I say these things, women get angry, but the reality is that there's a significant burden of performance on men versus women.
The funny thing is, it's only the focus on sex that I think would piss some people off. This is pretty decent advice for everybody: is make yourself useful and don't rely on superficial elements of your being in order to get what you want. Because I mean, I'm not one of them, but I've seen plenty of men who are so good looking, it's actually been a curse in their life because they get things that they don't necessarily have to work for or deserve. And also become something of like, people look at them and they don't see someone who worked hard and did whatever. They just see someone like painfully good looking, chiseled and whatever. So, I mean, I think this applies to everybody, but materializes.
Real quick, I'll tell you, Viva. So notice how people get offended when I speak in generalities. This is something also that's a unique phenomenon that I see only with women. When I speak in generalities with men, no one bats an eye. If I were to say, yeah, most men are complete idiots and buffoons, no one in the chat would get angry at me and for me saying that. They'd be like, yeah, a lot of guys are fucking idiots. I agree with you on that. But if I say most women are retards, whoa, what the hell? Like, women have an inability to understand that the world operates on generalizations, and they will get offended and they will go ahead and make an argument for the exception to the rule. Well, I'm not an idiot. I'm smart. I have a 4.0 GPA, even though the whole education system is literally, made for women to be better slaves because they tell you to sit there and follow instructions. So of course little girls do better. That's a whole other conversation. The whole education system is scammed on women. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, men, when I talk in generalities, no problem. No one's going to bat an eye, even if I say something bad about men. But when I speak in generalities about women and I say something negative, they get extremely offended and they're unable to think of things from a rationally sound, logically sound perspective. And they get angry and offended and they get mad at me. It's a phenomenon that only women have this thing.
Well, I'd say you might be right on a broader scale, but if you generalize about other demographics, I think you'll find those demographics or those broad groups will get angry at the generalizations, and we're probably going to get there in 1 second. But just the thing about you said about school being designed for girls, and any girl or anybody who's saying that's a sexist thing. We got 3 kids, 1 boy, and we're homeschooling the boy now because school is quite clearly not made, or at least today's schools are not made to deal with rambunctious boys, because they are, I don't care what anybody says, physiologically, psychologically different, and not necessarily better. Boys are I think, are bigger idiots for a longer period of time than girls. They don't sit still. And they're not just like harder to deal with. They're more destructive also, because they're like strong, primates compared to girls that don't break shit all the time. And the teachers who happen to be at school happen to be young females, by and large, like 90 some odd percent, who can't deal with young boys. And it either leads to the emasculation of young boys, or the medication of young boys, or I should say the prescription of medication to young boys, or what we did, pull them out and we'll do it ourselves, despite it making us both go freaking crazy. It's 1,000% true, or at least accurate. But it's funny, Myron. Like I can see people not liking the delivery, not liking the some of the rhetoric, but it's very tough to disagree with thousands of years of human nature. Like, this is what religion was predicated on. This is what the nuclear family was predicated on, and whether or not there are exceptions to the rule that, by and large, there's plenty of nuclear families where there's abuse and broken marriages and unhappiness. But you're talking about odds over a longer period of time. And in poker, an amateur can win every now and again, but over the life of years, the professionals will win, just because all the odds tend to flip in their favor over a period of time. But I'm
just saying what we all say in the locker room anyway. And I also, the other thing you were saying, right? Like, I find it interesting, right? If you look at ancient Islam, biblical times, etc., there was no cell phones. There was no emails. There was no text messaging. How is it that all these different ancient civilizations understood that men need to be in leadership roles in order for the civilization to progress, right? Like, whether it was Asian, Indians, Native Americans, whatever, they all were patriarchies and understood that men need to be at the helm for us to be able to progress as a society. And then even to this day, it wasn't until we have all this technology and all this modernity that, now that we've pretty much civilized the world to an incredible degree, that we let women have some kind of power, and they still fuck shit up. So my thing is, I'm just saying the truth, that quite frankly, when it comes to leading a society, prosperity, etc., men need to be at the helm. And if they don't, we're going to end up with women at the helm, and that's going to lead us to problems. Because let's be honest, man, women suck at everything when it comes to competing with men. Men are better than women at every single endeavor when you actually compare the two genders. And for all the women that are probably losing their minds watching the stream right now, it's like, that's not true. We have kids. Well, you need us to have kids, you dumb bimbo. So the reality is, in every regard where humans can compete, you put a man against a woman, we are better than them.
I'm trying to think now, because sports, it's an easy one, except they'll say gymnastics, women perform better than men. I was going to make the joke that, there haven't been very many warrior societies that were led by women, because I presume they would have been decimated by the other warriors that had, like, the Maoris as their warriors and whatever. Okay, let me try to.
There's nothing, bro. I'm telling you, we're better than them.
I'm going to feign outrage at what you just said. It's terrible. There have been very many good female chess players. There's been very many good. I can only think in sports. Literature, there have been some great thinkers. So, I mean, the question is going to be, you mean just by numbers, proportions, statistics? And then the argument's going to be, well, that was only because, the Ayn Rands of the world had to break through the patriarchy. There are just as many great philosopher women as there were men, but men kept them down. That's going to be the retort.
Yeah, they always say that. But then I say, well, women have more privilege and rights now than ever before. And they still, like, with affirmative action, they still can't beat men out. Like,
well, excuse me. In the hip hop industry, I'll say the women are doing very well with Cardi B. In the music industry, what's her face? Lady Gaga just went to space. No, it is interesting, because, like, people will say, you're wrong. There have been great many female thinkers. And then you're going to say, yes, but then statistically, the ancient Greeks were by and large men. The argument's going to be, well, that's because the men prevented the women from reaching the tops, or they built their knowledge base off the backs of women. And then it's just going to be a question of statistics, and then it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Did the women not attain those peaks of intellect and physique because they were forced to raise families, or because they chose to raise families? And then is it a natural order of things to have that distinct, or that differentiation between the sexes? I'm going to have to mull that over. The politically correct part of me wants to get mad at you for what you just said, but now I'm going to have to actually think about it for a second.
Yeah, because even when you think about it, right, like, because women now, right, over the past, 60, 80 years, right, thanks to feminism, they pretty much have had all the same rights and privileges as men. Why do they still not dominate STEM? Why do they still not dominate infrastructure jobs? Why do they still not dominate certain fields where they can make quite a bit of impact? And the reality comes down to men and women are simply just different, and women aren't interested in a lot of the things that men are interested, that just tend to lead to civilization growth. Women just aren't interested in this stuff.
I'm trying to think. Well, STEM, industry, anything that's not based on strength as a general requirement. So take out athletics, take out oil rigging. I am trying to think of endeavors that are purely intellectual, and then whether or not you reach something of a parity. But then you get into things like STEM engineering, which is purely intellectual. There's nothing physical required, and there'll be statistical overrepresentation at higher levels, but of men, I think, but statistical overrepresentation of women in education. And so what happens is they're filtered out for whatever the reasons. Is it because the brain is different, or because they realize, yeah, you can't have a family and do this? But I don't think you can disagree with the stats overall.
I'll be honest. I think women are just lazier than men in a lot of regards. Like, and I'll explain what I mean by this. Right. So for I can't tell you how many times. Right. I've met a guy. He had to sacrifice, and this is anecdotal, but I'll go somewhere further with this. Men will sacrifice, right, a dream because they understand, damn, I can't be a musician and make a bunch of money. It's just not going to happen. I got to go ahead and do a job that I hate doing because there's a burden performance on me to get out there and make money. I got to become an engineer because my family told me I need to do this or else, whatever, right? They'll sacrifice doing what they do. But women, right, they'll go ahead and they'll also kind of sacrifice. Okay, my family told me I got to be a pharmacist because I can't be a singer, whatever. But they're far more likely to quit that job and pursue what they want to do, or find a man that will allow them to take care of, the provisioning and stuff, and then they'll go ahead and pursue their dream. So in other words, like, women have a back door that they can escape out a lot of the times, where they don't necessarily have to be the provider. But for men, it's like, if you don't provide, you're not going to get sexual access. No one's going to respect you, etc. So we have to work. Women don't, right? That's the difference. I can't tell how many times girls will have a degree, right, in a certain field, and they'll just quit. They'll say, I don't want to do it. And they just won't do it because they don't need to. Versus the guy, he doesn't want to do it, but he still has to get up every day and do it.
Well, now I've got there's a logical problem here, is that on the one hand, you're saying that, women should be the homemakers and not endeavor to do what the men do and become senior partner at law firms. Yep. But then unless you're suggesting they're not quitting to raise a family, they're just quitting because they're lazy and not actually doing the other part of what you think that they should be doing, as the natural order of things, which is building a home.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? So, they might not see it through for different reasons. Maybe she wants to pursue something else. Maybe she wants to pursue a family. But the point I'm trying to make is that they always have that luxury of where if they can find a guy to take care of the provisioning side, and then they can focus on what they really want to do. Versus for us, we can't do that, right? Like, we have to, I can't tell you how many times guys give up on their dreams or stop doing what they want to do or don't pursue what they want to do because it's just simply not going to make enough money for them. And they understand that they got to live in reality and earn money. Versus for women, they can go ahead and quit doing what they're doing or find a man to take care of them so they can pursue their dream. And do what they want to do. So with us, we're very rigid in our opportunities. Versus for them, they have a bunch of opportunities, right? And that's because women are the privileged gender. And my thing is, people get mad at me for acknowledging this and saying it out loud. They say, "Oh, well, that's sexist." Well, reality is sexist. I argue that sexism only benefits women. I really can't think of how sexism benefits men. The only way I could think of that sexism benefits men is like men are basically able to have sex with multiple partners without being judged. But maybe that, if you want to use that as an example, but in general, sexism widely benefits women over men.
Some would actually disagree. Now that I thought about it a little bit more, that the women that do dominate tend to also be men. I'm thinking of, that's the bada bing, bada boom joke. Myron, so some people are going to say that the reason why you're not getting married is because you're not going to find a woman who's not going to be offended by what you're saying.
You know what's amazing? A lot of girls actually, privately agree with me a lot and say, yeah, no, everything that you're saying is 100%. And they agree because a lot of women respect guys that can just say it like it is, right? They want a guy that isn't afraid of what they're going to say, can tell them that this is what it is. Like, as much as women sit there and say they want to equal, they really don't, man. They want a guy that's superior to them that could tell, like, look at them and be like, yeah, be quiet. We're going to do this. Oh my God, that's so hot. He can just tell me what to do, because it's such a foreign concept now of men just standing up to women. Like, so many guys are so scared to tell a woman to shut up because they want to get laid so bad. Like, oh my God, I can't say anything that she's not going to like because then I will get laid. But it's like, if you could just simply tell a girl, like, you're dumb, we're not doing that, we're going to do this. Like, so many girls would respect you and find that attractive because so few guys can do it. Right now, I know there's a bunch of women probably in the chat right now that are mad. Oh, guys are misogynist. Shut up, bitch. You love guys like me that can tell you to go in the kitchen and make a sandwich. Women want guys that tell them to go back in the kitchen. You know what? For all you guys that watch the stream right now, it's okay. I got y'all. If you guys are watching this with a woman, hey, go get him a sandwich.
You see,
now, if she doesn't get up and get you a sandwich right now, guys, you might need to rethink what you're doing. All right.
Now,
so
some people are going to get wildly offended. And I would say, first of all, if you can't hear what someone says and you don't like it, and you're going to get offended, you're a bit of a baby. I'm looking at you, Myron. I'm saying, like, this would lead to a divorce in my family, not because I'm a beta male, but because first of all, maybe it's a different time where, and maybe I'm just fortunate that I don't actually disagree with my wife, or we don't disagree on meaningful things. So, like, we don't have to have these critical arguments on issues that would otherwise drive a wedge in people's marriages. Like when we moved to Florida, we both agreed. It might have taken some persuasion on my part, but not this type of force or psychological force. When the kid came out of school, we both agreed. And so, like, we're in simpatico. But some people say, like, if I told my wife to go make me a sandwich, I'd get fucking divorced. And some people are going to say that's why people do get divorced, is because some of the men, it's not a question of being dominant and the man who could defend them, but being verbally abusive and psychologically abusive. But I know that maybe most of what you're saying is sort of tongue in cheek. And also you got to have a bit of a spicy delivery to catch people's attention.
Yeah, the reality is, right, there's a reason why women want a guy who's stronger than them, taller than them, and can tell them certain things. And there's a reason why they love books like 50 Shades of Grey. They want that dominant, assertive man. I'm not telling you to be walking in the house all the time and like, hey, come here. Like, I'm not saying do that. But what I am saying is that women are very aroused by and attracted to men that could put them in their place when they get out of place. Because let's be honest here, there's plenty of times where women will sit there and try to test you and, try to disrespect you and see how you respond. Sometimes you just got to be able to tell her, shut up. Okay, I'm watching the game. Shut the fuck up. Go make a sandwich and be quiet. And she might like pout like, no, that's so mean. But deep down she's like, damn, like that is hot. This guy could tell me what it is. And a big part of being a man is being able to identify when you need to do that, right? Like, it's obviously you can't do it every day. You can't be Sean Connery, but at the same time, you also can't be a wimp where you're scared to do it. You need to be able to wield that authority and be able to do it when you need to. Now, of course, there's going to be women in the chat that are going to get mad and be like, oh, that's not true, blah, 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 because these are unflattering realities about female nature, because, they've been fighting for decades to be treated as equal. So you get this guy on the podcast that comes in and tells you, like, yeah, they're actually aroused by you telling them to shut the hell up. They're not going to like that, right?
Yeah,
but the truth is, if you're the right guy, they will like it.
But that might be good, and I'm putting it in quotes, that might be good advice for having sex and short-term relationship, short-term dating, but not for a marriage. Because I view marriage more like a corporation, and you're working with the vice president type thing. Although who's the president? I view it as a corporation in terms of the relationship. Not that might be good advice for dating, but not good advice for marriage. But we'll time will tell, and success leaves clues. But Myron, if people are offended by this, let's get into the one that's really gonna piss them off.
Sure.
Israel and the Jews, Myron. We have to get into this.
Okay, sure. Sure.
No, I say tongue in cheek. You got in trouble recently for. I think I gave you a bit of a hard time, and I'll explain it. But people say at some point, the people who take a trajectory like you in terms of what you talk about on the internet, eventually you find yourself in the rabbit hole of the Jews are behind everything, question everything, even, I say basic historical facts. Did you get into the most trouble for some of the things you said, not questioning the Holocaust, but rather questioning certain elements of the history of the Holocaust? How much flack did that get you into? And did that have anything to do with whether or not you were at risk in terms of going to England for social media posts?
Yeah, so my thing is, look, I think we've been lied to about a lot of things, right? Not just World War II. We've been lied to about 9/11. We've been lied to about the Iraq War. We've been lied to about the conflicts in the Middle East in general. We've been lied to about the USS Liberty. We've been lied to even about October 7th in many regards, right? And that's in modern day society. So, in many wars, right? So I think the important thing here, the bottom line is, I think people need to be able to look at what's going on and be able to question things in a healthy manner. Obviously, you don't want to get into the whole conspiracy theory rabbit hole and go deep down in there and just, become an autist. But I think people need to be able to critically think and look at everything with another set of fresh eyes and be able to, assess what we've been told the truth about and what we've been lied about. Because, I mean, there is an absolute trend here where, many big historical events we've been lied to about.
That's the, and full disclosure, people can accuse me of whatever. I've had this discussion with people where, the term Holocaust denial has taken on such a broad meaning now, where people come and say, well, let's talk about the numbers, talk about the extent, and that's Holocaust denialism. And it's illegal in certain countries. And I've always said, like, you need people to be able to discuss this, because if you don't allow them to, on the one hand, it will legitimize their views in their mind, and it'll actually legitimize the conspiracy theories in the eyes of others. The question becomes, however,
censorship never works, right? And I think this is what Israel is like, kind of losing a lot of support here, where they're trying to censor people with these anti-Semitism laws, and all they're doing is making people think, oh, well, they're hiding something, oh, they're lying. Like, censorship simply doesn't work. I mean, the Daily Wire tried it with Candace Owens. It's hurt them significantly, even to the point where Brett Cooper, when she left, they thought it was because of censorship, when in reality it wasn't. But that's how much people hate censorship. So to censor people and tell them, oh, you can't talk about XYZ, all it does is empowers them to want to talk about it more. And I think this is something where, they're losing quite a bit of support in the main arena in the information war for trying to censor people from talking about certain things.
Well, no, but the question is, censorship in terms of talking about it is one thing. The other issue is that there's always going to be an underbelly or a niche, and people are going to say, like, there's going to be, in the markets of the world, there's going to be a market for people who want to make that argument that, the calculation as to how many bodies could have been cremated in the Holocaust, and you tap into certain niches, and then the question becomes whether or not the discussion is one about free speech or commercial exploitation of the niches that will exist. And when do you distinguish sincere questioning versus when it descends into potential niche? Like, I don't like the word grifting, and I'm not going to use it, but getting into a niche where there's going to be people who are going to be interested in hearing it, despite the fact that it's either been debunked or that the only use in entertaining it is to entertain that niche. If that question was clear.
Yeah, no, I think my thing is, I think, I'm as pretty much a free speech absolutist / maximalist. I think all a conversation needs to be entertained, and even the conversation that might be looked at as like, potentially being grifting, I think it needs to come in, and then people should be able to challenge it if they do think that it's grifting. I think all discussion, as long as it doesn't lead to imminent violence, needs to be had, right? So these laws that are in place about, the certain event, I call it the Cookie Monster event, when I'm on YouTube. But like, this discussion in general, I think it needs to be allowed, and I think people need to be able to question it, because whenever you forbid people from questioning things, you create a market for it, and then you almost like give energy and power to the thing that you're trying to avoid. So I think all conversation should be able to be had. And then what? So that way people can come in and question, and they can go ahead and have a debate. Because my thing is, I like the arena of ideas where we're able to kind of come in and then go ahead, bring in the people that don't believe the World War II narrative. Bring them in and let them talk to the people that believe in the World War II narrative, and let them have a debate. And I love those discussions, because then now we're letting them have the discussion, and then the people can decide what do they believe in, what do they agree with, because you're letting both parties debate each other, and then the people can decide.
It's going to be a very, I don't know if it's politically incorrect. Parents are Sudanese.
Yeah.
You're black. The question is this. I mean, say black as in you're physically black skin.
Depends on who you're asking.
Well, that's the question now.
Yeah.
Well, do you view, do you consider yourself to be part of what they refer to as, African American, Black America, or do you feel that do you consider yourself coming from a different demographic that doesn't necessarily see eye to eye with what they typically refer to as Black America?
Yeah, so me personally, I consider myself black, right? I grew up, in the United States. I'm very familiar with black culture. My skin is black. When I check the little box, I put black. But black people, interestingly enough, and it's only this one demographic of idiots called FBAs, Foundationally Black Americans, who basically, for those that are unaware, thank God that you're not aware, but yeah, basically they're like descendants of slaves. They look at me and say, you're not one of us, because I'm not a descendant of a slave. And they consider anyone, for that matter, that isn't a descendant of a slave as not black. If you're Jamaican, if you're Haitian, if you're from anywhere from Africa, Nigeria, whatever, they don't consider you black, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. But this small demographic of idiots don't consider themselves black. Don't consider people that aren't FBAs black, but I consider myself black. I would argue most black people in the United States would consider me black, and they probably consider themselves black regardless of where they're from or whether they're related to a slave or not. But yeah, it's only that small demographic of people that don't think so. But I think I am. I think other individuals would probably identify me as that. Like literally, I am the definition of African American. Like my parents are from Sudan. I was born here. Like I am African American to the T, quite literally.
But I mean, like in terms of culturally, between Sudanese immigrants who might come to America and have as much cultural collision with Black America as you would imagine white America would. Like, do your parents have that experience with what is historically or traditionally regarded as Black America?
So like, funny enough, like my dad, he doesn't like being called black. He likes being called African. And I've noticed this with a lot of people, because like being black in America has such a bad connotation with being affiliated with crime and hip hop and degeneracy. So like growing up, like my dad never wanted to be called black himself. He was like, no, I'm African. I'm not one of them. And I think a lot of people that, you know, are first generation, their parents might have felt this way, whether they came from the Caribbean or they came from Africa directly, they felt this way. But yeah, I mean, you know, let's be honest, like, you know, the Black community does push out a lot of degeneracy, single mother households, drug trafficking, gang violence, violence in general to solve their problems, not being educated, drug use, alcohol. Like, there's a lot of degeneracy. And like, as an adult, I can look back and be like, damn, yeah, this is stuff that isn't necessarily good for the community, but this is something that's pushed by this culture. So I can see why, now as an adult, I can look back and see why my parents didn't want to be affiliated with it.
Okay, and then this goes back to the Jewish question. What's the Cookie Monster is the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that one I've never.
Oh, the Cookie Monster event. Whenever I'm on YouTube, I refer to it as the Cookie Monster event.
I used to have code. We used to call it the My Sharona Cyrus instead of coronavirus, but I've given up on that. And the reason why I see the question about, you know, like Sudanese versus Black America, and then the Holocaust question, where I say, in this, I don't find anything you've ever said that offensive. Some of it I'll disagree with it, and I think some of it's, I'll say, juvenile for lack of a better word, or shocking for the sake of being shocking. Underlying points, you know, there's a discussion to be had there. When it comes to the Holocaust, sure, and the number, and then, you know, I saw the video where like, oh, you know, everyone do the math. I saw someone say do the math, Viva, and I'll say like, okay, I'll even entertain the question and just say how many millions. And I say not exclusively Jews, because the whole irony, and I think I mentioned this in my reply to you, it's not like the Nazis were a little bit better to the blacks, but they weren't good to the blacks. They weren't good to the gypsies, the gays, the handicaps. I mean, how many do we agree that the Holocaust happened? And I don't know that anybody. Yeah, and I don't know who disagrees with that. And then you say, okay, well, if it wasn't 6 million, do you agree that it was many millions of Jews? And I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that, because like the Nazis were kind of kept good records decent enough. So if you don't think it was 6, if it was 5, 4, I know that qualifies as Holocaust denialism, and I'm not sure that I agree with that, because like, as far, you know, 4 million versus 6 million, that's a genocide. Getting back to the, you know, the Black America versus not, one of the historical, correct me if I'm wrong, but like one of the historical gripes between the Jewish community of America and the Black community is the success that the Jewish community had in recognizing the event, the Holocaust, versus Black America, you know, not necessarily getting the recognition or the historical recognition for slavery, but also the reparations for slavery, where, you know, Jews got something back from Germany and German companies. And like, your dad's from Sudan. Is there any of that harboring that resentment for? I say success in quotes. It's not. Well, no, for the, call it the successful acknowledgement of the Holocaust in particular. Like that's where I think a lot of the resentment of the Black community comes, in terms of the Jews were successful at getting, you know, turning it into Hollywood Oscar winner movies, although there's been a bunch of slavery movies that have been very, very widely recognized as well, but that there has been a successful campaign to single out the genocide that was the Holocaust, and not say the Armenian genocide, not say the Holodomor. I always get excited if it's Holodomor. Yeah. So did your folks, or did you have any of that resentment if it even existed. I might be presuming it existed, but
No,
why
not
were
at all.
Okay,
Not
so
at all. Like my dad grew up, like he told me, like he never ever used any of the injustices against like African Americans in the United States ever to justify any of his positions. He always told me that his thing was, he always used to yell at me and say, I brought you United States. It's the best country in the world. More opportunity here than ever before. I would be a doctor or a lawyer if I was raised here. You better be something. And then he'd smack me if I was being a mess up. So that's how my dad raised. He never ever used like the history of the United States to try to justify, grievances. He always said, I brought you here, which is the best country in the world. You better be a somebody. That's how he always framed it to me.
All right. And now the other question is, the flip side to that question is, you talk about the cookie monster, the Holocaust, and people can get mad at you. You also, and I know it, you deal with the Black community just as bluntly in terms of statistical overrepresentation. Does the Black community ever look at you and say, well, you're the son of Sudanese, you're not part of the American Black experience, and so what you're saying about us, we take offense to because there's historical reasons, or you're picking on a small demographic to come to broader sweeping generalizations of Black America at large?
Yeah, no, that's 100% the reason they come at me. They always say, well, you're not one of us, so therefore you can't comment. That's their argument 99% of the time. But what I tell them is I tell them, like, not only have I dealt with a lot of the obstacles that you guys cry about, whether it's poverty or being labeled or being racist, getting stereotypes thrown at them, because, people used to follow me around the store and think that I was a criminal as well. Also, I had to deal with the whole, after 9/11, I had to deal with the whole, I hate the term Islamophobia, but, people.
But there was distinct. Yeah, there was distinct stereotyping after 9/11. It went from the Russians being bad in every movie to Middle Easterners.
Exactly. So I and I hate to even use this, like, whether like, but yeah, I got it on both ends. I got it from the being Black, and I also got it from being Muslim. So like, I can sit here and put myself in a victim box too, but I refuse to do that. So when they say that and say, oh, you can't even comment on this because you're not one of us, I'm like, well, I've dealt with a lot of stuff that you guys have, but that doesn't even matter, because my thing is, I don't think you have to be a part of a group to be able to comment on said group. If you're able to identify, patterns, or you're able to see things, the truth is the truth, regardless of who reports it, right? So I think this whole concept of you need to be a part of said group to be able to criticize group as well. But the only reason the FBA's use that is because it insulates them from valid criticism, saying, well, you're not one of us, you can't comment. And that's what a lot of these low IQ individuals use to kind of curb criticism from themselves.
Myron, what is the post that you've taken the most flack from?
Man, so I get a lot because I'm critical of, obviously I'm very critical of Zionism and Jewish power. I'm very critical of the Black community. I'm very critical of, I got a lot of slack actually for the H-1B visa stuff. I talked about, bringing in Indians to the United States to work these H-1B visa jobs. Elon Musk didn't like that. So yeah, man, I get it from all angles. I've been critical of Islam even as well, even though I grew up in a Muslim household. I said it a bunch of times where I don't think, Sharia law is compatible with a first world democracy where freedom of speech is a paramount principle, because unfortunately, Sharia law doesn't allow you to engage really in freedom of speech. You look at any of these, even the wealthy Arab countries, the monarchies and the dictatorships, if you criticize the government, you're getting killed. You're going to get Khashoggi'd in a embassy somewhere. So, I am able to be critical even if it doesn't necessarily benefit me. I've even insulted the Arab world and the Muslim world. Well, they'll think of it as insult, but I've even criticized many of their fault points, and they don't like it, because my thing is, I will say something even if it doesn't benefit me or attacks the group that I'm aligned with, because I think the truth is more important than how I feel. So there's many things I'm critical for, but yeah, people are obviously most aware of how I'm critical of the Black community, critical of Israel quite a bit. But some other things that have got me in trouble. Definitely the H-1B visa got me in a lot of trouble on Twitter, especially.
Which end were you on? You were on no more Indian immigrants to fill the visas, or you should allow the immigrants in?
No more Indians to fill the visas.
Because you were disagreeing with Elon, who said that he attenuated his position over that debate.
Him and Vivek agreed with the H-1B visas. I was anti-H-1B visa because there's a multitude of reasons why. But I'm not for foreign labor, and I'm also not for a foreign group of people coming in that have completely different cultural values to us, coming here in swarms and not acclimating. Because the reality is, a lot of these people that come from these countries like India, etc., they don't assimilate. They simply don't. Now, that's an uncomfortable truth that no one wants to hear, but they don't want to assimilate a lot of the times. They want to keep their Hindu God. They want to keep their cultural their culture and stuff like that, which is cool. but that comes at the cost of infiltrating our culture. And I look at places like Toronto, I look at places like Western Europe, where they've allowed this mass immigration, and then these places have basically turned into shells of their former selves. Like, you go to London now, London is filled with Muslims everywhere. And this is me as a Muslim guy. Like, this doesn't feel like I'm in England. It doesn't feel like I'm in London. I just see a bunch of North African immigrants everywhere, and I'm worried about getting stabbed. Toronto now is basically turned into India, so mass immigration is problematic.
I was just saying, like, I went to Toronto recently, and it was, I say, call it what you want. It felt like going into Bangladesh in the airport, and then literally, like, the lineup for the immigration visa checkpoint was just Bangladeshians, but now this is the problem, though, or the problem. This is the question. Your dad comes in. You're a Muslim family. What is the path? What is the path for Islamic or Muslim assimilation? It has such a negative connotation, but what is your ideal in terms of assimilation in Western society for anyone in particular, but from your Muslim experience?
So I think, especially these Western countries, whether it's United States, Canada, whatever, I think they need to stay white majority Christian countries the way they were founded by Protestant white men, because that's the way the country was founded. And I do think that that's the best way for the country to continue having the rights and privileges and the structure that it had in the first place. Because what ends up happening when you import too many immigrants is they bring their way of thinking, and what ends up happening as the culture slowly starts to change. And let's just be honest here, Muslim countries don't value free speech. They just don't. And there's a bunch of cultural and religious reasons for that. But if we want democracies, if we want freedom of speech to be paramount, we can't let them be the dominant force in this. And again, I'm going to get ran up the flagpole for saying this, but I'm calling it like it is. I think the countries need to stay in majority what they were founded by in order to preserve those values, right? And I think disintegrating the way the country was founded for economic gain through H-1B visas or whatever is not worth the trade-off.
In our Encryptus in our locals community says, show us Rabbi Myron, but over on Rumble. May I ask who Rabbi Myron Gaines is?
Oh, I have like a hat that I put on every time I go into certain things.
All right. Well, let me ask you. You mentioned it, Zionism, and I might be one of the very few people also who does not equate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. But I had on Gadi Taub last week, and I asked him to define Zionism, and I think he gave a decent definition. What's your definition of Zionism?
Zionism, man, I would say to be very, very clear about this, because I do think that, given the fact that the Jewish people have been persecuted for a very long time, it makes sense that they would need their own homeland. But when I'm talking about Zionism, I'm talking about specifically the state of Israel, where it's located, and the preservation of Israel, particularly when it comes to what used to be British mandatory about Palestine. That's what I'm referring to when I say
that's the existence of the state of Israel. So critical of Zionism. And I don't really care to get into it, because I don't even. It's not that I'm going to think less of you if you don't think Israel has the right to. Well, if you don't think Israel has the right to exist where it exists, or the Palestinians have the first claim to the land, when you're critical of Zionism, so in that sense, what critical of Israel's right to exist where it is, under the modalities that it exists, under the conditions that it exists.
Yeah, precisely. Their right to exist over another group of people's right to exist that were there before. So, I'm completely sensitive to the fact that, they've been persecuted, kicked out of a lot of countries, had issues, and haven't had a homeland. There are diaspora people very aware of that. But I think them having a homeland at the expense of another group of people is not acceptable. I think they should have a homeland, but displacing another group of people, I think that's problematic.
Yeah, and then I said, I want to say I'm not interested in, because I know what the responses are going to be, and then I'll ask you the question: how far back do you go in terms of who was displaced from the land of Israel? And then you'll say 200 years, and someone will say 2,000 years, and that's why the Jews get to have it back. And this is where, like, it's just there's an impasse.
It becomes a religious debate, and then it becomes a biblical thing. And I know exactly what you mean. Like it's like almost you go down this hole that no one's ever going to be satisfied with this with it. So. No, I completely understand why you might not want to get into that. And it's really cool.
And people ask me, it's like, well, are you Zionist or are you pro-Israel? I was like, first of all, I can easily evade the answer, because Israel exists whether I like it or not, or whether you like it or not. And I'm not there to say Israel should not exist. It's like, am I anti-Canadian? Canada exists. A lot of natives would say Canada shouldn't exist where it is because it displaced a lot of natives, and not just a couple of hundred years ago. To which I'll say, well, Canada's there, and I'm not advocating for the destruction of Canada, and therefore I respect this the country of Canada's right to exist. People, and
Now,
it's,
what
and
I
it's
will
all
say is this, though, because I agree with you on that. That like at this point, like, bro, we got to deal. Israel ain't going nowhere, right? I've said this a million times too, as well, for the fanatical, pro-Palestinian people. I tell them, look, Israel's not going anywhere. We need to figure out a two-state solution. Okay, that's the only way that we're gonna fix this, because Israel ain't going nowhere. Obviously, the Palestinians aren't going to go anywhere. They're trying to get them to go somewhere, right? As we saw with we're going to take over Gaza, whatever. But I think the only way that Israel's going to be able to live in peace in the Middle East without constantly having to worry about being attacked is they're going to need to come with a two-state solution. Now, we can make the argument about, who's been preventing this, whether it's Netanyahu or whatever. But I think at this point, the only way to move forward is we need to come up with a two-state solution. Now, that's where I think the conversation needs to go. This whole, who has historical rights to land, whatever, that's irrelevant now at this point, because we are where we are. So I do think the path forward is a two-state.
Yeah, well, and that's where I was also. But then the question becomes two-state under what modalities? And some people say two-state with the right of return, which is effectively a one-state. Others say a two-state, and then two-state with one state that refuses to recognize the right to exist of the other. Eventually we'll get there. I mean, the Irish, the IRA, or the Northern Southern Ireland, they resolved their differences after enough people got killed. But it looks like we're not yet there in the Middle East. Myron, if I may see if I have any questions in the chat for you. There's
sure, man, sure.
Well, let me read this. It's not a sponsor, but Biltong, if you want to talk about healthy foods and healthy meat, Biltong has his own channel. He's a great guy. King of Biltong, get some Biltong. Go to Biltong USA, code Viva. And Guido 240 says, Myron, you're wrong. Women were first class, and now they're second class. Now second class, they were held on high and taken care of, and they had it before making suffrage. This is, well, the religious argument to this is that it's not sexist to say that, the men and the women have separate roles. Some people consider it antiquated, and if you consider it antiquated, then go live out your wildest modern dreams and see how that works out for you. We can certainly see the way it's playing out to some extent in modern American society, but then you compare it to other countries, and then you'll never find an ideal, or you'll find some better ideals than others. Myron, did I forget to ask you anything that I wanted to? This has been... the funny thing is, I think the chat's going to cut. I don't think anybody really hates you, but I like this discussion because I know what the media portrays you as, and they'll take a few clips from here and say you're a total misogynist, anti-Semite, whatever. You're a reasonably thoughtful, thought out guy, and I don't think many people are going to think ill of you after having watched a full 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, like, again, all my worldviews, right? Whether it's, people say my views on, Israel or Jewish people or, or Islam or immigration, whatever, I'm able to always explain how I came to that conclusion. Now, people might not necessarily like it, but what I've realized is when I'm able to, get the opportunity to explain why I have the worldviews that I have, people kind of say, okay, you know what? I see how you came to that conclusion. I might not agree with it, but I can see how you came to that conclusion. So, it is what it is. I understand that sometimes the way I put my ideas out might be crass or rude, and people might not like the delivery.
It's deliberate. It's deliberately provocative, and some people might call it immature or whatever. But it's, first of all, if people don't like it, they can listen to someone with a British accent say it in a much more polite manner and cloak the verbiage and whatever is more palatable.
Exactly.
Myron, so are you going to stay live on your channel afterwards, or are you going to end this at the same time?
Yeah, I'll probably still stay live. I'll cover some news and stuff like that. We'll probably go until I think like 8 p.m. when we do Fresh and Fit. But yeah, I'll go on a little bit longer. Okay.
Encryptus, this guy that you're looking at right now is the VivaFrei equivalent of the Jamie, Rogan's Jamie. Encryptus, what's up?
You do have some other tip questions. A couple people in the chat wanted me to remind you, and I just have to say this was freaking entertaining as hell. The chats were off the chain. You've got about, I gotta go say 80% love you, 20% screaming hate.
Yeah, no, we can talk about, like I said, I'm still chilling. So any questions you guys have on anything, if you guys want to expound more on whatever you guys want. I know that we kind of went surface level and a lot of the stuff weren't able to go deep, but whatever you guys want to talk about.
I think we went deep on, we were good on some of this. Let me add this one over on locals. Boopsy says, ask him, having many women makes you judge and compare each woman. That's my argument against that level of promiscuity, Myron, because once you've done that, it becomes you've led a very exciting life. It becomes very difficult to settle down with,
well, I would argue, I would push back on that. It actually makes you appreciate girls that are good more, right? So when you deal with, so what I've realized with men is when you've dealt with a lot of women, right, that are annoying, because a lot of women are annoying and stupid and not really interesting. When you do find one that is, you end up, we tend to appreciate that more, because men don't get the same level of options and, volume when it comes to dealing with the opposite gender that women do. So when men are in a position where we're getting, attention from women, or where we're getting treated well, we tend to appreciate that far more. This is why being a nice guy as a man doesn't work, but being a nice guy as a woman absolutely does work.
And Encrypted says there are women in the chat who do agree with him, as well as women who do not agree with him. All in all, show and the chats are very entertaining. And then says, that's from Pants on the bottom, says, with Viva, W Viva, W Myron, W interview, which I think means win. Let me just go see. I'm gonna take it out just so I can get some.
Yeah, the
more.
women that don't agree may tend to be fat and ugly a lot of the times. So,
the idea, it is amazing that I was talking to some younger kids, like, where do you meet people these days? And I'm old school dog run, but you go to the dog run now and people are on their freaking phones and nobody's making any human to human interactions. Censorship versus truth. Grift thrives in lack of knowledge. And there's Europa, the last battle. There's a video there. Is the chat room going crazy? My iPhone and even my PC joining chat room and never getting there. I don't know if it was going that crazy. Okay, here, Rich987 says 1360. When it comes to Afro-Americans, I'm not going to read that word, that'll get me canceled. You and Barnes are deranged as Ben Shapiro and Glenn Greenwald. I don't even know what that means. I know the 1350 is the idea that 13% of the population accounts for 50% of the violent crime murders, and that's the black population.
Oh, it's like because blacks make up about 15% of the U.S. population, about half of that, so 7 to 8% is men. And they make up
and the age bracket. So it's like it's probably maybe 1 to 2%. But again, the question is, is the purpose of that to say there's something genetic within Black America, or is it because they get convicted more because it's a racist institution, or they're prone to it because of poverty and historical inequalities? But the bottom line is,
I think it's a multitude of things. It's obviously, the culture. It's the what they value versus what they don't value. The fatherless households, that's a big one. And then this is the one that's going to get me in trouble, but IQ as well. Blacks in general have lower IQs than other groups of people. Asians are number one, whites are second, Hispanics are third, and then blacks are fourth. And some people get mad when I say that.
Yeah, but they'll get mad at you and they say, well, the IQ test, I mean, if you put patterns and who gives a shit about the IQ test, they're going to say that is a culturally irrelevant and patriarchal or white patriarchal test in the first place. I'm not convinced, the ability to predict patterns or detect patterns, which is what much of the IQ test is. But like who composed whatever piece is purely cultural. But there was I forget, I just lost the question.
And there's been a bunch of meta-analysis that have like proved this. As much as they try to say like, oh, this is like pseudoscience, that's not true. No, it's absolutely true, and they've been suppressing it for a very long time. But IQ is tied to race. Now, does this mean that anyone that's black has low IQ? Of course not. But what I'm saying is that when in general, when races are tested, certain races tend to score lower than others, and this is just what it is. Now, sorry, that's just how it goes.
And I remember what the comment was that I was looking at in Rumble. It said Jews per capita, which is where I wanted to go with this. Because some people say, well, good, IQ doesn't necessarily translate into criminality. It doesn't necessarily translate into being a good person. And then the flip side is, well, the bottom line is you're talking about statistical overrepresentation. You said something earlier about Jewish dominance or Jewish influence. I forget what it was. It was talking about Zionism, Israel, and Jewish power. Sorry, that's what I think it was.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah.
Elaborate if we can all get ourselves into a lot more trouble today.
Yeah, sure. Well, what that means is basically the overrepresentation and the influence in certain what I call trigger points in society that allow for basically the ability to preserve Israel, right? And preserve Israel utilizing this network of different individuals in different places, different industries of different positions of power for the self-preservation of Israel. I'll give you an example. So Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump was able to get into office. A lot of people don't want to admit this, but let's be honest. He was able to get into office because of the Zionist lobby. The Zionist lobby of someone like Myron Gaines, who gave him $100 million, who obviously her husband, Sheldon Adelson, made a bunch of money as a casino tycoon. Then someone like Bill Ackman, who made his money in a whole other different endeavor who is a lifelong Democrat who came in and supported him. And then other individuals as well that are Zionists that, all basically got together and said, you know what, we need the president's going to be more, more pro-Israel. Let's make sure that we get him in regardless of our political affiliation because right now what matters is getting Trump in to preserve Israel. So what I mean by this is utilizing that influence to push and get someone into office for their own means. And they're able to do this by having positions of power, influence, obviously money. And that's basically why Trump is in power right now and why he's president. This is because he understood that being extremely pro-Israel was going to be critical to him getting back into office.
I'm trying to think of not how to push back, but just to even steelman the rebuttal to that. The numbers are relatively accurate. There was 100 million through whatever that PAC was that Adelson gave to. The question is going to be being pro-Israel versus being anti-Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think of how to ask the question, which is going to be, and is it? So the argument is that there's rich Jews who are Zionist or who are pro-Israel that you think have the determinate impact on the outcome of the election. And then others are going to say, well, okay, the 100 million, whatever, but there's 77 million people who voted for Trump. On the one hand, either they want that as well, or on the other hand, the 77 million who are not Zionists, certainly maybe some of the big ones are, wanted Trump anyhow. So the question is then, what degree is the being pro-Israel related to his election if it actually got 77 million Americans to vote for him who seemingly espoused that policy? If the people didn't like it, he wouldn't be elected, is the point.
No, sure. But I do think it's very important to understand that money, right, that was given to him, that was donated to him, was used to run the ads, was used to run these rallies, was used to be able to create this enormous social media platform that he was able to do, running these ads, etc. Because running a campaign is very expensive. And I do think that it's also important to note that, the fact that this crosses party lines, right? Like whether you have someone, I'll give you an example. You got someone like a Jonathan Greenblatt who's a leftist, and then you got someone like a Ben Shapiro who's a conservative. When it comes to Israel, they agree, right? And they both understood, look, Trump is going to be the better party for Israel. Let's get him in, right? Bill Ackman, etc. So they will go ahead and change their voting philosophy or even their party lines depending on who is going to be more beneficial to Israel. So that's just one example. There's other examples as well, but I do think that to not acknowledge that they have an enormous amount of influence and power in certain regards. The fact that AIPAC is able to exist to this day with no fair registration compared to other lobby organizations is wild. Right, like Thomas Massey went on the Tucker Carlson podcast and literally said, "Yeah, everybody has an AIPAC guy. I'm the only one that doesn't have one." And then the fact that he doesn't have the support that these other ones have, they tried to primary him. So I do think that there's an enormous amount of power there. Where if you want to be a politician in the United States, you must bow down to the Israel lobby. Otherwise, you're not going to get elected, or your ability to get elected is going to be significantly hindered. I do think that that's very important to note.
Someone in the chat asked who were the biggest donors, and a quick to Trump's campaign, and a quick grok overview is Timothy Mellon, who I don't know who that is, 150 million to Make America Great. Miriam Adelson, 100 million. Elon Musk, 118 million. Richard Wheeline, who I don't know who that is, 84.1 million. Isaac and Laura. I'm just trying to see who looks like they have Jewish names, because some people are going to say, well, look, you got Elon Musk who's donating massive amounts. Assume
but
Timothy Mellon
too. Some of them
then I see where you're good. Yeah, and I see where you're going to go with that as well. And then the question is going to be the resentment. The resentment seems to be that it's, I know your answer is going to be, it's not because it's Israel, it's just because it's another country that we are seemingly, that election is, loyalty to which is determinant of the outcome of elections. And it could be Madagascar, it would be just as offensive. Others are going to retort and say, yes, Jews, you can't disagree with the influence, because on the one hand, some people will get offended at you and say you're an anti-Semite for noticing the Jewish influence. Flip side, how many times Jewish community is very proud of the fact that, what is it, like 30% of Nobel laureates are Jewish or half Jewish or Jewish descent.
And so my thing is, they'll gladly take credit when it's positive, right? Like, for example, I've seen it many times where it's like, hey, Jews led the the civil rights movement. They led the gay rights movement, right? They'll say that, like, but if you say anything negative, well, yeah, well, they also, are involved in pornography. Oh, well, that's fucked up. So my thing is, I just kind of call a spade, and it depends on the way that you say it, and then they'll go ahead and call you an anti-Semite. But my thing is, I'm against all foreign aid. I was against giving aid to Ukraine years ago when the war first started, and then they were calling me, a Russia shill for saying that. But my thing is, I'm a hardcore American nationalist. That's why a lot of the opinions I give might not necessarily be accepted by many when I say things like, yeah, we need to limit immigration. We need to have an immigration moratorium. I don't want the United States to be a Muslim majority country because I understand what comes with that. Despite the fact that I grew up in a Muslim household, I'm able to take myself out of the situation and understand what's best for the United States, regardless of whether it benefits me personally or not. And I think that's very difficult for a lot of people to say or admit. But I'm critical of everything. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Israeli conflict in Gaza, I think this is, just another example of us giving foreign aid. And quite frankly, my biggest issue with a lot of the problems that's going on with Gaza is it makes us look bad on the world stage, giving this aid to Israel, and they're conducting this military campaign and killing a bunch of innocent people because we lose influence in the process, and it makes us look horrible internationally as well.
Well, flip side, they've also been giving, ironically enough, giving funds to the to Hamas as well, directly or indirectly. So
Sure.
it's funny that it's the meme. The bombs are going off on both sides, and like my tax dollars, somehow also my tax dollars. And the funny thing is, when you notice the statistical overrepresentation, when it's a bad thing, people get offended. When it's a good thing, they take pride. The funniest thing is when you notice it on the same thing. Like, it's one thing, okay, a statistical overrepresentation of Jews in porn, yes, and there's a historical reason for that. But the best is when you say, like, all right, well, there's an influence in science or the arts or media, but don't dare say that Jews control the media because they don't control it. There's just statistical overrepresentation in it, for which we're proud when we want to take credit for it, but which becomes anti-Semitic if it's a source of criticism because of the message being conveyed. So it's one thing to, one screen, two films, and that's the best example. No, and this is why I can't really disagree with you. And there is statistical overrepresentation for which the community is proud, but then you have to take the responsibility that comes with that statistical representation. And when you see, the first impeachment and the disproportionate number of players who you might make an association with, you can't blame someone for coming to that conclusion and noticing it. Flip side, you look at the other side and say, well, there's enough overrepresentation as well there fighting the impeachment. And then you get some people saying, well, why are there just so many, in any event, in a Christian society like America, that you have 1.6% of the population that has this influence? And then it leads into all the other questions about IQ, culture, heritage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're willing to have the conversation, Viva, because a lot of them would say, I'm not even going to entertain this. This is an anti-Semitic, conversation. The fact that you're even willing to have the conversation, I think speaks volumes. And I know, yourself, you're ethnically Jewish, but you're willing to have these talks. And, I think that's very important that, we can have these discussions and be critical of our own people, like I have been with Muslims, and you have been with Jewish people or Zionists, whatever it may be. Though I know
I was critical of Israel's response to October. I mean, I'm critical where I think it's warranted. I'm not, and I hate the tribalist mentality that, like, Viva, if Israel ceases to exist, so will you as a Jew. Okay, fine, but that, and I say the longer term existence means being critical, if only out of love. Even assume that critical could be either because you want to destroy or because you want to build up. When I'm critical of Pierre Poilievre, some people say it's because I hate him. Others might say because I expect more from him. But I had on a guy, Gadi Taub, last week, and he's a proud Zionist who does not any longer believe in a two-state solution, and I can understand his argument. But when I asked him the questions, how did October 7 happen at the scale it did for the duration it did, and the answer was, I don't have a good answer for that. That's in and of itself, kind of not a good answer when you're relying on the same people who were at the helm of that catastrophe to determine the proper response to that catastrophe. And then I get people.
I think Netanyahu let it happen. I think the conspiracy theory. I think Netanyahu let it happen, man. Honestly.
Well, so I asked him about that because there's two depending on your political leanings in Israel. There's two conspiracy theories to that. The left would say Netanyahu let it happen so that he could justify expanding, or I'll say the criticals of Israel or the anti-Semites would say Netanyahu let it happen on purpose to justify expansion. When I asked this to Gadi Taub, he said there's some people who think that the left allowed it to happen so they could blame it on Netanyahu. Because, I was explaining, like, there are people who hate Netanyahu in Israel as much as libs hate Trump here. And so I said, well, so then how do you know they didn't let the intelligence lapse? And then, his argument is for both sides. Do you think anybody would let 1,000+ people get slaughtered in the most horrendous manner possible? And I mean, it's, if you're thinking about humans as normal humans, that would be your response. But there's a bunch of libs out here that I would have no doubt would love to see something terrible like that happen to Republicans and Trump supporters, etc.
Yeah, and I would say too, just so that I was going to say one more thing.
Myron's take on number 7, building number 7 and killing people.
Sure, I'll talk about building 7 here in a second. With 9/11. So real quick, when it comes to October 7th, when it hit me that something was wrong. So the day after October 7th happened, a lot of people don't know this because they buried this story. Egyptian intelligence came out immediately and said, we warned the Israelis. We told them that Hamas was planning this attack. We had seen them on our intelligence services had seen them planning this attack and staging it. We told them. Now, the reason why that's important is because Egypt has an agreement with the United States where our aid for Egypt, because it's a very poor country, they have a lot of debt. Our aid for Egypt is contingent upon them playing nice with Israel. Jordan as well. Jordan and Egypt are allies to Israel because we give them quite a bit of money to play nice with them. So when the Egyptians came out and said, hey, look, we told them about this, we warned them about this, that told me right then and there, I was like, oh, wow, they want to continue to get their aid. And they did warn the Israelis because they know that their aid is contingent upon this. So that's when I started to question, like, okay, something's going on here, how the Israelis, who have the most advanced border, like that area is one of the most secured areas in the world. They have an enormous amount of technology. How did they let these guys with paragliders and rudimentary
and bulldozers?
Like,
well, I had actually asked that to Gadi as well. First of all, I remember that story about Egypt warning them. And I remember I tweeted out about the time. I could go back and get my tweets. But one of the theories was that they didn't actually warn them. This was Egypt, again, trying to make Netanyahu look bad as though he didn't heed to the warning. And when I asked this historian, how did it happen? He said they became too reliant on technology. And I'm like, that's I mean, okay, fine. That all you're explaining to me is like grotesque criminal negligence to let this happen, to have allowed this to happen under your watch in the first place. But how does it explain the amount of hours that it took for the military to respond to some of these villages? Israel's 6 hours across by drive, let alone jets and tanks and whatever. And again, no good response. And so it's either the most catastrophic criminal negligence imaginable, in which case I wouldn't empower that catastrophically, critically negligent a machine to wage the proper response, or something far more nefarious. And after everything we've lived through, I mean, you can have very evil people out there who enough said on that. Building 7, Myron. What I mean,
so
Building 7 obviously was blown up.
Sure. So everything with 9/11 as a line, this comes back to like the whole, where I question every narrative, whether it's World War II, we were discussing earlier, the Cookie Monster event, 9/11, USS Liberty, all this stuff. So when it comes to 9/11, right? I did a whole podcast on this with a guy named Ryan Dawson, really smart, one of the best 9/11 researchers. But long story short, I also brought Richard Gage on my show to talk about this. Building 7 was a controlled demolition. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. 3,000 plus engineers agree. A plane did not hit Building 7, but yet it went down perfectly in a symmetrical fashion. And not only was it a controlled demolition, it was a controlled demolition to the degree where whoever put the bombs in there did it at a perfect level, textbook controlled demolition. So, which, leads to more questions with 9/11, like how the hell is it that, these random hijackers were able to hijack these planes, crash them into these buildings, and then the third building that goes down in a perfect fashion alongside the Twin Towers, which also went down as in a controlled demolition fashion. And there's a bunch of reasons for this. I mean, I can go in so many different ways, but I'll just to answer it, controlled demolition 100%.
Well, look, and again, I'll be called crazy because everyone's excuse for the Twin Towers was jet fuel planes, and okay, fine. What's Building 7 then? That it was burning and the fire, whatever they called them, the water sprinklers were not working, and that melted the foundation. There has never been a skyscraper, a metal structure, a steel frame skyscraper that has ever fallen, collapsed as a result of a fire, except 9/11. The excuse being, well, planes never flew into them. Neither did that happen with Building number 7. And what was in Building number 7? There was very important information being stored in that building.
government agencies were there. There were definitely government agencies there. I know that one for a fact. I think some private. The other thing that's also very important for people to understand, again, not to get into a Jewish conspiracy, but I do think it's important, worth noting. The person that purchased the World Trade Center was a guy named Larry Silverstein. Now, anyone that's familiar with commercial real estate in the United States, to get a loan for commercial real estate, you need to be able to demonstrate that the property is profitable to be able to get a loan from the bank. Because Larry Silverstein got a loan from the bank and leveraged, and he put just a little bit of his money in, and was able to procure the entire property. Now, the problem is that with the Twin Towers back then, they had a big asbestos problem, and a lot of the units, not the units, a lot of the office space that was there wasn't rented, right, for that problem. So this was $1 billion stake that needed to be done to basically get it all done. And it would have cost more to get this asbestos problem handled than it would have cost to just build a whole new structure. So he got this. So not only was he able to get this loan to purchase this property, despite the fact that it wasn't cash flowing, but he also was able to get a very unique terrorism policy on the World Trade Center, which was also weird. Now, I know some people might say, well, Myron, he was able to get this terrorist policy because back in 1993, the World Trade Center had a bombing with the failed attempt by Ramzi Youssef. And I would agree with you on that and say, yeah, you're right. There was a failed terrorist attack to bring the World Trade Center down back in 1993, who ended up, Ramzi Youssef is actually the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who planned the 9/11 attacks. But the point is that, too many similarities there. And then not only that, he bought the property literally like in July before 9/11, the same year that 9/11 happened. So, and there's even more to it there. I don't know where you want me to go with this, but there were people that were going into the World Trade Center that were Israeli intelligence assets, and this has been documented now at this point at a wide level. But just too many problems. And I think we focus so much on Al Qaeda and that connection and the Saudi Arabians, which yes, they were involved in 9/11. I'm not going to sit here and say Osama and them weren't involved. They were, but we almost always avoid the Israeli intelligence angle that was very prevalent in 9/11.
Encryptus.
So both of you guys just said you didn't know who the tenants were. I'd love to give you that information.
Oh no, I was going to pull it up. Solomon Smith Barney, major investment bank, leased 37 floors. This is the World Trade Center 7. U.S. Secret Service, CIA, Department of Defense, IRS, SEC, Office of Emergency Management, other tenants. Encryptus. Who else?
My focus was CIA, SEC, U.S. Secret Service, and IRS, and the financials. It's a government building.
Yeah, it was.
I don't think there's many people who actually think that one fell down as a result of natural fire, because it makes no sense even based on the explanation of the time.
Yeah, even NIST couldn't properly explain it, but where they were the ones that were tasked with covering, how the buildings what went down. And then on top of that, the person that designed the Twin Towers literally designed it so that if it gets hit by a plane, it won't go down. There's never been a steel structure that went down from fires. So it was 100% a controlled demolition. It is what it is. I think at this point, Americans are awake to the fact that, 9/11 is something that we've been lied about. A guy named Kurt Weldon went on the Tucker Carlson show, and, he even alluded to a lot of this stuff as well. I think people are waking up to the fact that 9/11 is probably one of the biggest lies. But, if we were to tell them the truth, that, hey, the U.S. government alongside Israeli intelligence, alongside the Saudi Arabians, alongside Al Qaeda, all work together to, organize an event. And again, it might not have been organized the way they think. I think it was more along the lines of terrorists were trying to attack us, and then we just allowed it to happen, right? They thought they were successful, but we merely allowed it to happen to, kind of create this police state, this terrorism feared, society that we have now, the Patriot Act, etc. I think if Americans knew that all these components were working together, it would make the American public have a deep level of distrust. And, this is JFK. I think there's a big reason why they didn't disclose the JFK stuff. We finally got what we've been looking for the past 50 to 60 years, which, discloses finally that Israeli intelligence was in fact involved with killing John F. Kennedy, which they've been trying to keep restricted for the past 60 years.
Well, hold on. I think that one might be factually, well, I say factually incorrect. One of the documents that purportedly showed, the Jews have the money and machine guns is, from what I understand, fake. The Israeli intelligence level of involvement, I don't know that was involved in anything related to the actual assassination. I think what was revealed was that it's actually the American deep state, LBJ, with the CIA, not actual Israeli involvement, unless there's a document that you've got.
Yeah, so no, I could go through this. So what ended up happening was on a lot of the different declassifications with JFK, what ended up happening was there was like a part that was redacted, right? And if you look at it on the document, it says CIA is okay with disclosing this, right? But except for the parts that are bracketed, and the part that was bracketed, now that on this last new release, said Israeli intelligence. Now there were other countries as well that were bracketed in there too, but I do find it interesting that the one that they focused on bracketing or redacting the most was the Israeli intelligence. And then when you find out that James Jesus Angleton was obvious, because they also redacted a lot of his hearings that he gave. Which a lot of those hearings ended up where he was admitting that he was involved with helping them procure their nuclear program that they currently have now. And this was against John F. Kennedy's wishes, where he did not want Israel to be involved in nuclear proliferation for a multitude of different reasons, we have this nuclear arms race going on in the Middle East right now with Iran and Israel. But that was a big, that was just a lot of the stuff that they wanted to not be shown in these documents. So, people said all the time, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory to say that Israel was involved in JFK's assassination. They absolutely were involved. And then the bracket of stuff that they had kept redacted all this time finally was unredacted. We saw that it said Israeli intelligence agencies. Now, with that said, I do think it's very important to state that, I'm not one of these crazy people that are going to say the Jews killed JFK. No, there was a group of people that wanted JFK gone. The Zionist lobby wanted him gone. Obviously, the mafia, organized crime wanted him gone. The Cubans wanted him gone. They were mad about the Bay of Pigs. The intelligence agency wanted him gone because he threatened to smash the CIA into a million pieces. Alan Dulles had an axe to grind with him. There was a lot of people that wanted John F. Kennedy gone. So to put all the blame on the Israelis is disingenuous and intellectually disingenuous. But I do think that all of them had a shared interest in getting rid of him for different reasons.
Well, I know that I know the guy who I consider to be the brain of the JFK assassination, and he'll listen to this afterwards, and he'll be screaming at the screen. But my understanding, Mark Robert, he would be very fun to talk to. I'll see if we can hook it up. But no,
hook him up.
All right, no, and his take, and I mean, he's one of the. I think he is, him, and I know that he would say he knows more than Roger Stone, and Roger Stone and Oliver. Hold on one second. Who's the director of JFK? No, Oliver Stone is the director of JFK, and Roger Stone. I want to make the same mistake one of those congresswomen.
Well, I could debunk the Roger Stone movie right now. The problem with the Roger Stone movie, JFK, the famous 1991 film that chronicles Jim Garrison's pursuit to find the killer. The problem with that movie is it doesn't cover the Israeli angle whatsoever. But
some people are going to say, my understanding is that the Israeli angle never existed until very recently, where no one actually credibly or seriously thought Israel had anything to do with it. And my understanding is that the recent disclosures don't actually prove that. What they do prove, the Jewish element.
I'll tell you why. So I'll tell you what the fascinating reason why. A lot of people don't know this. The reason why they didn't cover the Israeli angle is because the person that funded that movie was a guy named Arnon Milchan. Arnon Milchan is a Jewish billionaire Zionist who was a spy. He literally admitted this on Israeli television. He was a spy, and not only was he a spy that worked as part of Israel's unacknowledged nuclear program. So in other words, his job was to ensure that Israel's nuclear program stayed unacknowledged and stayed secret. And this guy funded the JFK movie. So when you actually look at it, it makes perfect sense. The person that funded the JFK movie was a spy for Israel that was focused on making sure that the nuclear program never saw the light of day. And then when you find out that JFK's biggest issue with the Israelis was quite literally because of the nuclear program, it makes perfect sense why the JFK movie was funded by this guy and clearly omitted the nuclear angle with Israel, because this had been known since like the 80s. There was I forget maybe it was a Doug Valentine. I forget who the author was that wrote about this. I mean, the book was banned everywhere, but he did go into this in Doug Valentine or something like that talked about the Israeli angle. It had been out for a very long time. So they knew it back in the 90s, even when they did this movie. It's just that Arnon Milchan made sure to never mention that part in the movie. And then what ended up happening was the JFK movie ended up becoming the most famous piece of media that documents the assassination of JFK. And this is why so many Americans are completely unaware of the Israeli angle.
I'm reading a chat
from here. Mark Robert helped on that movie. He knows Oliver Stone and advised on this, and he's the one who says very clearly that information was fake. And it would be
Which
a wonderful
information
debate to have here.
The
what information was fake?
one of the new releases which talked about which mentioned Israel was apparently a falsified document, and I don't want to make a mistake as to which one it was now. But no, look, that might be a fun discussion to have with Mark. I won't get into it because I know I'm not the expert on this.
Sure,
Jen
no problem.
Jen Mole over on Rumble says, "Great guest and great show as always. Thank you." And TT Fulltimer over in our locals community says, "You can like this or not, and with the population of the USA, 100 plus 70 divided by 2 equals 85. Why, looky there." Okay, I don't know that. I'm gonna have to figure that one out in a second. And Big Bad Bob. There are pictures of 2 so-called Israeli art students for some reason renting 2 entire floors of the Twin Towers, standing between a massive number of boxes on both sides from floor to ceiling and wall to wall with a company label on those boxes. And that particular company made nothing but demolition materials for the demolition of tall buildings.
He's referring to Team E11, if I'm not mistaken. And that's just one group. So here's the thing. With 9/11, and I'll go over this real quick. There was multiple Israeli spy rings that were caught in the United States leading up to and or around the time of 9/11. So that was one group that was actually living in the towers and doing an experiment. I think he's referring to Team E11. Then there was another group that was actually caught by the DEA that were basically going around and taking pictures and doing surveillance on government buildings. The DEA wrote an entire memorandum on this, on Israeli students that were posing as Israeli intelligence assets that were posing as students. And then on top of that, there was the urban moving systems cell that was basically following the hijackers around. So the cell, the urban moving systems guys, which is, you know, tied to the Dancing Israelis, these guys were moving basically following the movers, the hijackers around, because a lot of the hijackers actually lived in Hollywood, Florida when they were taking these flight classes, and these hijackers lived in Miami Beach and were surveilling these guys the whole time under the premise and the guise of a moving company. So what ended up happening when the attacks happened on September 11th, these Israelis were dancing on an apartment building, and a woman saw this and called the police. So the police ends up catching up with these guys, and they're driving an urban moving systems van. And a lot of them had, I think 1 or 2 of them had large sums of cash and plane tickets to leave the United States the day after. And, you know, obviously this was suspicious. So what they did was they ended up calling the FBI. FBI interviews these guys. 2 of them, when they ran their names, came back to Israeli intelligence when they ran their databases. And then when they interviewed them under polygraph, hey, did you guys have foreknowledge that the towers are going to be attacked? A couple of them failed the polygraph test. And then to make it even crazier, about 70 days later, when they're in immigration custody, they're deported back to Israel. They go on a talk show and they admit on the talk show that they were there to document the event and they knew what was going to happen. And the interesting thing is on September 11th, when the towers were hit around 9 a.m., they were there at about 8 a.m. waiting for the towers to hit, and they were taking pictures, dancing, celebrating, whatever. Then it gets crazier. The FBI executed a search warrant on Urban Movie Systems at headquarters. When they went there, they found a bunch of hard drives and computers, which doesn't make sense for a movie company to be there, and that they were going to basically stop shop after September 11th. Then they looked at the financials, and they found that the moving company was funded by Israeli intelligence. And then on top of that, the guy that ran the company, a dude named Dominic Suter, right? And you guys can all look at the FBI 302s. They're all out there, by the way. You type in Dancing Israelis, FBI 302s. You can read all this yourselves. So they look for this guy, Dominic Suter. He runs. He flees back to Israel. To this day, they still haven't caught him. He's hiding out in Israel. This guy, Dominic Suter. So, you know, look, when it comes to 9/11, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say, because a lot of people, again, they're lazy and intellectual dishonest. Oh, the Jews did 9/11. No. But what I will say is there was absolutely Israeli Zionist fingerprints all over 9/11 in tandem with other deep state assets, Al-Qaeda, etc. So, and there's even more. There's another ring that was caught out of Tennessee that was in the towers months before the towers went down. I could go into crazy detail on this, but I don't want to bore your audience. But there's a lot of smoke and fire there when it comes to Israeli intelligence assets that were around and or involved with the towers leading up to the attacks.
I noticed in the chat someone said, "Why is Viva suggesting the document was fake?" I'm trying to find the one. I know Jeremy the Quartering published it. I shared it with Mark privately, and it's the one that refers to machine guns and the Jews have the money. And I don't mean, I'm not trying to be funny. It says the backing of the Jews. Yeah, that's the thing.
What you're talking about. That's not the one I'm referring to.
No, that's why I just want people to. I'm not saying if we're not talking about the same document. I am certain that Mark Robert is certain that the document that talked about the machine guns, I think, and the Cubans and the Jews with the backing was fake, because even though it had the CIA numbers on it, or whatever it was. But yeah, no, it's
yeah. I mean,
it is.
I could definitely set up. I could set up a discussion with Corey Hughes and your guy if you want. They can debate it. But yeah, no, I mean, the document I'm referring to basically just it says here basically what it says is CIA is okay to release except for brackets, and then they finally removed those brackets.
That I
really
do remember. I do remember that, and then people were arguing that it doesn't really inculpate or implicate Israel in the actual plot itself, but that the idea they had to redact that it was even Israel in the first place was to save face for Israel. I remember that discussion happening when these files were released. But,
that, as well as the James Jesus Angleton information is also critical, because James Jesus Angleton, he was a high-ranking CIA operative, he worked very tightly with the Israeli intelligence agencies, and he was a big part of Israel being able to procure its nuclear weapon program, which obviously happened after John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
First of all, Viva, I don't get scared for things like this. I only get scared for immediate events of potential violence, and that's the fight or flight syndrome. Viva will get the call after this live LMFA. That's funny. Just so you understand, with total independence comes certain limitations, but comes certain freedom. First of all, they don't have my number, but no, I don't. It's funny, just as a joke.
It's funny that we've already went over a bunch of different things that most people would never touch. So it's funny that they would say that about you.
It's a beautiful thing. I know. I think they mean it tongue in cheek, but because I won't get the call because they won't make it to me, because there's no point in making it to me. Myron, we're going to do this again, and maybe sooner than later I'll come back down to Miami and we'll do another one. But this is
you're always welcome.
Thank you very much. And ordinarily we'd say our proper goodbyes, but you continue doing your show. I'm going to maybe go to my locals after party just for a few minutes. But Myron,
sure.
It's fantastic. Look, I've never, in as much as I disagree with certain things, like it's one thing to talk in generalities while simultaneously acknowledging that you don't get to treat any one individual in any predetermined way because of whatever you might assume or say by way of generalities for a group. And that's unfortunately the human brain works by making rules based on probabilities. But the true, I would say, criticizable behavior comes when you treat an individual differently as a predetermined basis before even having any discussion with that individual. And I dare say, I like it.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate you allowing me the ability to speak and kind of convey my ideas. And, though you might not agree, you're open to hearing it out, which I think is something that's like kind of lacking in today's society, where people are able to, have a discussion and talk to people and say, you know what, well, okay, you think this way. Can you tell me why you think that way? Right. And I really appreciate you affording me the platform to be able to give my worldviews and why I think the way I do.
And what I love is that if you've said anything factually incorrect, the aggregate knowledge of the internet is going to figure it out on both of our ends. And then it'll make me revise, correct, and be better for the future. And the same for you.
Yes, absolutely, man. And that's one of the beauties. So no, it's always great talking with you, Viva. It really is. I always can, I know I got to bring my A game and come prepared whenever I talk with you. And it's always great.
You've done good. I'm going to go back and listen. And I know our community is going to, it was never a question of just like finding a gotcha. If some of the stuff is incorrect, I know that you would reassess as well. And that's what that's what it means to have opinions and be ready to be challenged on them. Myron, it's amazing. I'll DM you after this and we'll meet up for coffee.
All right, man. Absolutely. Take it easy, Viva.
All right. Have a good one.